She trusted him. She loved him. She was about to tell him they were having a baby. But before she could speak, everything fell apart. Her husband was lying. Her father was hiding. And her mother was kidnapped. In a single day, Emma lost the meaning of family, love, and safety. Now she must face a terrifying truth. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones sent to destroy you.
My father's funeral had barely concluded when a gravedigger pulled me aside. He whispered that the casket was a decoy arranged many years before. He believed my dad was not in his right mind. He then handed me a tarnished key, giving me a quiet warning about my husband. He urged me to go to storage unit 20 immediately. What I discovered in that unit took my breath away. In that instant, I knew my life depended on escaping the man I had married. I am glad you are here for this story. If you find it meaningful, please show your support with a like and comment with your city and country. I personally read every one of your comments. This story is a mix of fiction and life lessons. The names are changed, but the message is real. Your support is what keeps this channel alive. Thank you so much. I had just finished my father's eulogy at Austin Memorial Park Cemetery when the gravedigger's rough hand grabbed my arm. The words I had forced myself to say still felt lodged in my throat. Then everything changed. He spoke with a low and urgent tone. He said there was something he had to tell me. I tried to refuse, scanning the crowd for my mother. She was near the car with my Aunt Susan helping her. The other mourners were heading to the parking lot, just silhouettes against the gray sky. I told him that I was not able to talk right then. He replied that the casket is empty. My entire world seemed to tilt. For a moment, I could not process his words. Empty. The same casket I had just been standing beside, the one I had touched while vowing to my dad I would care for my mom. The container meant to hold Raymond Martinez, 62 years old, my father, who had died from a heart attack 3 days ago. That is not a funny thing to say. My voice became suddenly sharp, the lawyer in me overriding my grief. I told him it was a terrible joke. He swore it was not a joke, glancing around with nervous eyes. The other cemetery staff were far across the grounds, unable to hear our conversation. Vincent said my father came to him 20 years ago carrying a letter. His weathered hand was trembling slightly. My dad had instructed him to guard it. He said if he ever needed to disappear, I was to get the letter and a key. 20 years. That number stopped my thoughts. I was only 14 back then, just starting high school, but 5 years ago my dad returned, Vincent explained. He revised the entire arrangement and paid him a very large sum of money. He said the threat was escalating and a dangerous person had entered my life. He knew that person was getting much too close. 5 years ago is when I met David for the first time. I told Vincent that I saw my father's body at the viewing. My own voice sounded foreign to me. Vincent said I only saw what I was meant to see. A sudden chill ran through me on that warm Texas afternoon. This man, with dirt under his nails and weary eyes, was either speaking the truth or he was completely insane. I informed him that I was calling the police. I started to get my phone, but Vincent Hayes, a name I recalled from the funeral documents, quickly shook his head. He said no. He pressed a small cold piece of metal into my palm. He told me my father knew I would want to get help. He knew that as a lawyer I would demand proof. He knew I needed things to be logical. He said to take this and I would understand. I stared down at the old brass key in my hand. The number 20 was stamped into the metal. I asked him what it was for. It was for Unit 20, Lone Star Storage on South Congress Avenue. My father was waiting for me there. Vincent then pulled out a worn envelope. My name was written on the front in my dad's distinctive script. It was the same handwriting from all my birthday cards and the title for my first car. 20 years. I was 14. My dad was already creating an escape plan. Even then, a plan for a detective who battled crime. But 5 years ago, when David entered my world, my dad knew the threat was serious. That is when the plan was truly set in motion. My phone buzzed, but I did not look at it. I stared at the envelope as if it could explode. Vincent's tired face had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the parking lot. He said I needed to leave right now. Do not go to your house yet. My father had made that point very clear. I said that my father is gone. But the word gone felt hollow because I was not certain of anything anymore. Vincent's hand tightened on my arm for a moment. He pleaded with me to read the letter and go to Unit 20. He said my father insisted it was a matter of life and death. He turned and left before I could say another word. The crunch of his boots on the gravel faded as he vanished between the tombstones. I stood there alone holding a key and a letter. Behind me, a supposedly empty casket was being prepared for burial. In front of me, my confused mother waited in the car. My phone buzzed again. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. The old paper seal gave way easily. Inside was a single page covered in my dad's writing. The very first sentence made my knees feel weak. Emma, if you're reading this, I have had to disappear. Tears began to blur the words that followed. Certain phrases jumped out at me. Vincent has given you the key. Everything I am about to tell you is the truth. I am sorry. Go to Unit 20. Then, written in large letters and underlined 3 times, were the words, Do not go home. Not until you visit the unit. Not until you know the facts. It said, if you receive a message from David asking you to come home, that sounds odd. Do not go. My phone vibrated for a third time. With a trembling hand, I looked at the screen. I had 3 messages from David, the man I had been married to for 5 years, the same man who held me just last night. The first message said, Emma. The second one, where are you? The third, come home now. Just those 3 words, no dear, no honey, not a hint of concern for me. It was a cold instruction, like an order given to an employee. I looked again at the letter, my dad's words swimming in my vision. The last sentence was the most shocking. They have your mother. I will explain it all. I love you, my girl. Go to Unit 20 now. Wait, son. My dad had written the word son, but I am his daughter. Could he have made a mistake with this letter? No. I checked the envelope again. It said Emma, clearly in his handwriting. This was meant for me. The word son was a mistake, or maybe my heart hammered. Maybe he left it there. It was a sign this was real, written in a hurry so long ago, a flaw he never corrected, hoping I would never have to see it. Vincent's warning echoed in my mind. If you receive that text, you must run. I glanced at my phone one more time. David's message seemed to burn on the screen, demanding I come home. Something was terribly wrong. It was more than just his harsh words, it was a gut feeling. My own instincts were screaming a warning at me. I read my dad's letter again, my hand still shaking. Then I neatly folded it, returned it to the envelope, and put it in my purse next to the key. I did not walk toward my mother. I did not go to our car. I walked in the opposite direction toward the back of the cemetery where I had parked by myself. My phone started vibrating again, an incoming call from David. I let it ring. Behind me, an empty casket was being lowered into the earth. Ahead of me, a storage unit contained answers I was not sure I could face, and somewhere in between, my father was either alive or I was losing my mind. I got into my Honda and locked every door. In the rearview mirror, I watched David's black Audi pull into the parking lot. He had come looking for me. He was right here. I turned the key, my heart pounding in my chest. I prayed that whatever was inside Unit 20 was worth all this, because I was trusting a letter from a dead man over my own living husband. And that terrified me more than anything. Alone in my car, I forced myself to read every single word my dad had written. My hands were not steady as I unfolded the letter for a second reading. The first time was a panicked glance, my brain screaming that this was impossible. Now I had to get the facts straight. In my mirror, I saw the cars of other mourners leaving, their headlights piercing the Austin twilight. I had locked the car doors with the motor running. My window was slightly open and I could smell the scent of fall leaves. My dad's familiar script stared back at me. Emma, if you are reading this, I am alive, but I had to disappear. Everything I am about to tell you is the absolute truth. 20 years ago, decisions I made put our family in danger. I believed that danger had passed. I was wrong. 5 years ago, a man entered your life. You know him as David Miller. That is not his real name. He was deliberately sent to you to destroy me by harming the one person I love most in this world, and that is you. 6 months ago, I discovered the truth. I have been working with federal agents, but the threat grew much worse. The only way to keep you and your mother safe was for me to vanish, to make them think they had already won. David is not the man you think he is. His feelings for you may have become genuine, but that does not make him any less of a threat. It makes him an even greater one. If you have received an unusual text from David telling you to come home, do not obey. They know I am not dead. They are using him to find you. Go to Unit 20 at Lone Star Storage on South Congress. Find Agent Michael Carter inside. He has the answers. You need to leave immediately. You and your mother are in grave danger. I am so sorry. You cannot imagine how sorry I am. But everything I did was to protect you. Trust Carter. Follow your instincts. Dad. I read the note again, my lawyer's mind searching for any inconsistency. The handwriting was my father's. The specific apology, you cannot imagine how sorry I am, was his phrase for true regret. He said it when he missed a birthday or a school play. David Miller, the man I married, was not who he claimed to be. We had been together for 5 years and married for 3. The sunlight glinted off my platinum wedding band. My entire life was a lie. The vibration of my phone broke the silence and made me jump. I answered it without thinking. Mom, are you there? The call went to her voicemail. Her familiar Texas drawl asked me to leave a message. She did not answer. My thumb had dialed her number out of pure habit. Mom, it is me, I said after the beep, my voice steady. I need you to call me back. It is an emergency. I paused, unsure what else to say. Please. I hung up and tried again, but it went directly to her voicemail. My mother never missed my calls, especially not today, unless something was wrong with her phone, or worse. A figure appeared in my rearview mirror. A tall man was walking through the parking lot. He held a phone to his ear while peering into car windows. It was David. My throat tightened. He was looking for me, about 50 yards away, checking every single car. I ducked down in my seat as my heart hammered against my ribs. My Honda was a very common shade of silver. He would know the license plate, though, or the law firm sticker on my back window. He began to walk in my direction. I had 30 seconds. I thought about the service road, the back exit. Some instinct had made me find a second way out earlier. I put the car in drive without turning on the headlights and crept forward, using the other cars as cover. David looked up at the sound of my engine, but two other cars were leaving through the main exit. I went the opposite direction. David broke into a run, his phone still pressed to his ear. I pushed the gas pedal once I was clear of the tombstones. Branches scraped against the car's paint. Gravel shot out from beneath the tires. I drove through the open gate and onto a quiet residential street. I took a right and then a left, putting distance and corners between us. I finally switched on my headlights and took a deep breath. My phone began to ring. It was David. I let the call go to voicemail. It rang a second time, then a third, and a fourth. After the last attempt, I put the phone face down and focused on driving. I grew up in Austin and knew these back roads. I could easily lose him. The ringing stopped. The car was silent again. Then a text message lit up the screen. I knew I should ignore it, but I read it at a red light. Emma, please, I know you are confused. I can explain everything. Please just come home. I love you. A second text arrived instantly. We need to talk about the baby. The world tilted more than it did when Vincent said the casket was empty. The baby. I had taken a pregnancy test just 3 days ago. It was positive. I had cried with joy in our bathroom, looking at two pink lines while David was out. I tucked the test into my purse, planning to tell him after the funeral service. Nobody else knew. Not my mother, not my best friend Sarah, not even my doctor. It was a secret between me and that plastic stick, so how could David possibly know? The light turned green. A driver behind me honked their horn. I pressed the gas, driving on autopilot. Our house. Had he looked in my purse? No, the test was in my glove box, tucked into a folded store receipt. Unless he had searched my car, unless he had been searching everything, looking for what? Some kind of leverage, something to hold over me. My father's warning echoed in my mind. He was sent into your life to destroy me by harming the one person I love most. My phone buzzed with another call. This time, I ignored it completely. I turned onto South Congress Avenue and headed for Unit 20 toward a truth that was about to change everything. The storage place was 10 minutes away. My husband was out there in the twilight, hunting for me, and he knew I was pregnant. The question was not how he found out, it was how long he had known, and what else was he hiding. A 30-minute drive across town brought me to a tall fence with rows of bright orange doors. Lonier Storage was a massive complex just off South Congress. The metal buildings were bathed in the glow of security lights against the darkening sky. The whole area felt deserted. The local businesses were all closed for the evening. A handful of cars were scattered in the parking lot. I did not know if they belonged to other customers or to the person I was supposed to meet. I parked near the main office and turned off the engine, listening to it tick as it cooled. I was about to open my door when a sharp rap on the window made me gasp. My heart jumped into my throat. A man stood outside my car. He looked to be in his early 40s and was wearing a dark suit, which was unusual for the Texas heat. He held his hands where I could see them. He flipped open a leather wallet, revealing a badge that gleamed under the lights. I rolled my window down an inch. Emma Martinez. His voice was calm and professional. I am Agent Michael Carter with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He continued. Your father sent me to meet you here. I remained frozen. Anyone could buy a fake badge online. He thought you might need some convincing, Carter said, unconcerned by my hesitation. He told me that when you were 8 years old, you convinced him to adopt a three-legged dog from the pound. You named her Lucky. She lived with you for 6 more years. My breath caught in my chest. Only my immediate family knew that story. We never had pictures of her. This was long before social media. I was 14 when she died, and I cried for an entire week. My legs felt weak as I stepped out of the car. How is he? I whispered. He is alive, Emma, and he is waiting for you, Carter replied. He motioned toward the back of the facility. Unit 20 is this way. I have been watching this place since your father told me about the key. No one followed you. Are you sure about that? As sure as I can be. He started walking and I stayed close behind him. We will know for certain once we get you inside and scan for any kind of listening device or tracker. I stopped walking. Tracking devices? Carter's expression was grim. Your father can explain everything. But Emma, you have to understand David's people are extremely sophisticated. If they wanted to monitor you, they have the technology to do it. My hand went to my shoulder without me thinking. It rested on the spot where I had gotten a vitamin shot 2 years before. David was the one who insisted on it. He said I seemed run down, that B12 would boost my energy. Could that have been it? Let us go, Carter said softly. Your father has been waiting 20 years to have this talk. We should not make him wait any longer. We walked past row after row of orange garage doors with black numbers. The facility was well lit but unsettlingly quiet. The only sound was our footsteps on the asphalt. Security cameras on buildings and poles turned to watch us pass. Unit 20 was at the very back, hidden from the main road by a larger structure. It was a smart location, I realized. You could not see this unit from the entrance. I pulled out the key Vincent had given me. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Take your time, Carter said. I slid the key into the padlock. It turned smoothly and the lock clicked open. I lifted the heavy metal door. The space inside was not a storage unit. One wall was a bank of monitors displaying feeds from different security cameras. I recognized the storage facility, but also unfamiliar streets. Another wall was a collage of maps of Austin and the surrounding area, all marked with colored pins. A cot and a small refrigerator were tucked into one corner. Stacks of file boxes were piled high along the back wall, and in the center of the room, rising from a plain metal chair, was my dad, Richard Martinez. He was 64 years old. He was the man whose funeral I had just left that afternoon, and he was standing right in front of me. My knees buckled. I had to grab the door frame to keep myself from collapsing. My eyes could only focus on his face. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, but it was him. Emma, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I could not speak. I could not even breathe. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. He took a slow step towards me, his hands raised as if to calm a wild animal. I know this is a shock. You are dead, I finally managed to say. I was at the funeral home. I kissed your forehead goodbye. That was not me. The guilt on my father's face was painful to see. It was a lifelike replica made from silicone. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has specialists who create them for witness protection. It had my exact height and weight with a face sculpted to be my perfect double. Someone paid a lot of money to the funeral director. The instructions were to keep the coffin mostly closed and the lights turned way down. I had to ask, paid by who? From behind me, Carter answered, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He explained, this was all for your father's safety. It is how we protect witnesses who are in extreme danger. I just shook my head, trying to process it all. The entire situation was just unbelievable. Ordinary people do not stage their own deaths. You cannot simply borrow a body to put in a coffin. Federal agents do not organize fake funerals, but apparently they did. My dad pointed to a chair and said, please, take a seat. I have to tell you some things that are going to be very hard to believe. Things I should have shared with you a very long time ago. I finally found my voice and asked, Mom, where is she? I tried her phone, but she will not pick up. The guilt on my father's face changed to pure agony. That is what I need to tell you. He turned to the screens and played a video that was recorded just a few hours ago. The video showed the parking lot near my parents' house. A black sport utility vehicle was parked there. Two men stepped out of it. My mother got out of her car after leaving the service. One of the men pressed a cloth over her face. She collapsed and they shoved her into their vehicle. The timestamp on the video read 4:17 in the afternoon. That had happened 3 hours and 43 minutes ago. No, I whispered the word. No, no, no. My father's voice was tight with pain when he said, they took her to get to me. They must have found out the funeral was fake. They know I am alive, and they know I would do anything for you and your mother. I was completely frozen, my gaze fixed on that screen. I watched as my mother's limp body was loaded into a dark van. Who? My voice was just a faint whisper. Who did this? My father's expression hardened. That is a very long story. It started 20 years ago when I worked as a detective for the Austin police. I made a decision back then that resulted in the death of a very powerful man's son. Carter then stepped closer to me. Emma, I understand this is a lot to take in, but we have a very short amount of time to rescue your mother. Your father has been cooperating with us for months. We have a plan, but you have to know exactly who we are up against. I turned to my dad, looking at a face that had hidden 2 decades of secrets. Tell me everything, I demanded. He nodded slowly and heavily. It all starts with a man named Marcus Vulov, and I'm afraid it ends with your husband. I sat in that small room right across from my dad as 15 years of buried secrets came pouring out. Carter stood near the monitors with his arms folded, keeping an eye on us both. Dad leaned forward in his chair, resting his elbows on his knees. He squeezed his hands together so hard his knuckles turned white. It was the year 2009, he started. I was an Austin police detective in the organized crime unit. We spent 3 years building a case against the Volkov family, mainly for laundering money. They were funneling millions of dollars through legal businesses like car washes, restaurants, and even storage facilities like this one. His eyes darted around at the concrete room we were in. I could not help but wonder if he picked this place on purpose, if it was just like the ones Marcus Vulov used to own. Marcus Vulov was the man in charge of the entire organization, Dad continued. Back then, he was 60 years old, a ruthless and smart man who used to be in the Soviet military. He always protected himself by putting several layers of people between him and his crimes. We could never get close to him, I said quietly, so you decided to go after his son. My father's jaw tightened. We went after his entire operation. Alexander Volkov, who was Marcus's eldest son, was only 19. He was in charge of one of the front businesses, a car dealership. We had solid proof that he was signing off on fake car sales to clean the money. We executed the search warrant on a Friday morning, May 15th, 2009. My dad's voice became completely emotionless, like a police officer reading a familiar report. There were 6 of us on the team. I was the lead detective. We announced who we were and went in through the main office. He paused for a moment and swallowed hard. Alexander was in a back office. He was holding a 9mm Glock. The moment we opened the door, he started shooting. He fired 3 times. One of the bullets hit my partner in the shoulder. So you fired back? I stated. One shot, my dad's voice cracked, to the center of his chest. He died before the medics could get there. The only sound in the room was the low hum from the monitors. Carter spoke up from his position by the wall. The shooting was ruled to be justified. Internal Affairs conducted a 6-week investigation. Every single witness confirmed that Alexander shot first. Your father saved his partner's life that day. But Marcus didn't accept that, did he? I said. Marcus Vulov had just lost his oldest son. My dad's face contorted with pain. I get that. I have a daughter. I understand what losing a child can do to a person. He wanted to get even. Not immediately. And that is what made him so much more dangerous. Dad got up and started to pace around the small room. After Alexander died, Marcus just vanished. He took most of his criminal operations underground. His younger son, David, was 21 at the time and a student at the university. As far as we could tell, his record was clean and he had no ties to the family business. My stomach lurched. David was a business major, a junior in college. Dad took a file out of a box and handed it to me. It was a university identification photo. A younger David with longer hair looked back at me. It was definitely him. 3 months after his brother was killed, David also disappeared, Dad explained. He dropped out of school and cut off contact with everyone he knew. We just figured he joined his father underground. I could not take my eyes off the photo. That was the man I married, just 21 years old, mourning his brother, about to be turned into a weapon over the next decade. Where did he go? I asked. Eastern Europe, Carter answered. We have managed to put some of the pieces together. He was in Moscow, Prague, and Budapest. Marcus still had connections from his days in the Soviet military. We believe he was training David, not just how to fight, but also psychological training, how to create a false identity, how to work his way into someone's life, and how to make them trust you without question. For 12 years, I whispered. That is right, 12 years, Dad confirmed. And then 5 years ago, you walked into that coffee shop on West 6th Street. The memory hit me with the force of a physical punch. The barista had mixed up my order and given me another person's latte. David, who was sitting close by, saw what happened. He offered to switch drinks with me because my latte was actually his. We both laughed and ended up talking for 20 minutes. He asked me for my number. At the time, it felt like it was meant to be. That was not a coincidence, I said, the realization dawning on me. Nothing about your relationship with David was a coincidence. My dad's voice was full of regret. When you two began dating, I did a background check on him. David Miller, born in Austin, a commercial real estate agent, with perfect credit and no criminal history. It all looked real, but it was a lie. The identity he used was flawless: a birth certificate, a social security number, and a detailed work history. They were all official documents and they were all filed correctly, but they were all fake. Someone with immense resources had created an entire fake life for him. When did you figure it out? I started to get suspicious about 3 years ago, just before your wedding. Some of the things he said just did not make sense. The childhood home David talked about had been demolished decades before he was supposedly born. His elementary school had no record of him ever being a student. But I could not find any hard proof, and you were just so happy. My dad's voice trembled. I convinced myself I was just being an overprotective father, that not every little inconsistency points to a huge conspiracy. But you kept looking. I hired some private detectives. They found even more holes and impossible details in David's story, but there was still nothing that directly linked him to the Vuloff family. It was Carter's team that finally had a breakthrough 8 months ago. Carter stepped forward to explain. We had been monitoring Marcus Vuloff's finances for years. One of our analysts found some payments going to a document forger in San Antonio. When we put pressure on the forger, he gave us a name, David Miller. After that, we got surveillance footage and used facial recognition software to compare it with old photos of David Volkov, but we made one critical mistake. Carter admitted, his jaw tight. We put all our focus on watching David, his every move, his calls, and his daily habits. We were sure that if Marcus was going to make a move, it would come through David. We never imagined that Marcus had a completely separate team, his own private enforcers. David doesn't even know they exist. They are old contacts from the Soviet days who only answer to Marcus. My dad's face was a mask of guilt. That is how they got to Linda. The men who kidnapped her were not connected to David at all. They were Marcus's personal crew and they went right past David. By the time our surveillance team noticed the black sport utility vehicles, your mother was already gone. It was a 98% match, Dad said. David Miller and David Volkov are the same person. My world started spinning all over again. I thought I had already processed the shock, but seeing this proof, this absolute certainty, made it all feel terrifyingly real in a way the letter never did. You knew for 8 months and you never told me? My father crouched down, forcing me to look him in the eye. We did not know what his orders were, he explained. Was he supposed to kill you, grab you, or just ruin your life from the inside? We had no idea. If we moved on him, Marcus would just send another person, a stranger we would never spot. So you just watched, I said, my voice full of betrayal. You let me sleep next to him every night. We had agents on your house 24/7. Carter cut in. We monitored the phones and tracked every move David made. If he had tried anything violent, we were ready to go in. But he never did, my dad said gently. For 8 months, David acted like a perfect husband. He went to work, came home, and ate dinner with you. That is what terrified me the most. Why? Because Marcus Wolof is a patient man. He trained David for 12 years for this moment. He was never going to rush the end. My dad's hands trembled. He wants me to feel what he felt. He wants me to see my own daughter broken by someone she loves, pregnant with the child of a man who plans to. He could not say the words. I shot up from my chair so quickly that it fell over. The baby? How does David know I am pregnant? My dad and Carter shared a grim look. We believe your house is bugged, Carter finally said. They are listening to you, possibly watching you, maybe even tracking you. We will know for sure after we do a full scan. My hand instinctively went to my shoulder to where I got the shot. Marcus chose to destroy my daughter from the inside, Dad said, his voice finally cracking. And he used my son-in-law to do it. Carter brought up files that showed 5 years of my life in cold, hard facts. One screen filled with folders, each labeled with a year. Inside were photos, dates, and places. My entire life with David was laid out like a crime scene. This is everything we have gathered in the last 8 months, Carter explained, clicking through the pictures. We got most of this from our own surveillance on David, but the older material came directly from Vulov's files. Marcus was keeping a record, I said, feeling numb. He wanted evidence. He wanted to show my father every single step of how he destroyed me. Carter's voice was professional, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath it. This was not just about getting rid of you, Emma. This was about total humiliation. It was about making Richard watch as his daughter fell for the enemy. The first photo was from the coffee shop on West 6th Street. It showed David and me laughing after they mixed up our drinks. The date on the file was 5 years, 2 months, and 6 days ago. That was not a mistake, Carter said. The barista was paid $500 to switch your orders. David sat at that table because Marcus's team had watched your routine for 6 weeks. They knew you were at that coffee shop every single Tuesday. The thought made my stomach turn. They watched me for 6 weeks. They set up the entire meeting to look like a coincidence. Carter clicked to the next picture taken in a bookstore. It showed David and me both reaching for the same book, a thriller I cannot even remember now. 2 weeks later, they made sure that book was on the shelf. David already had a copy at home that he never read. The next photo was from a restaurant. David was on one knee proposing. I was crying happy tears. He was holding up a small open box with a ring. A proposal, I whispered to myself, that Marcus Wulov paid for. That ring cost $14,000, all of it dirty money. Every memory I held dear was now ruined. It was all just one piece of a 15-year plan for revenge. Your house has been bugged for about 2 years, Carter went on. We believe they were installed one weekend when you were visiting your parents. David said he had to work and stayed home. A professional crew came in and planted the devices. They were in our bedroom, the living room, and the office. We did not know about them at the time, Carter added. We were not watching David yet. We did not know who he was. When we started watching him 8 months ago, we only tracked his public movements and calls. The bugs in your home were not active all the time. They only recorded when they detected certain keywords. They did not send out a strong enough signal for our equipment to find them until it was too late. They have been listening to me. My own voice sounded strange. For 2 whole years? Not constantly, he clarified. The bugs are triggered by certain words, words like your father's name, FBI, police, or testify. When you said one of those words, the device recorded a 60-second clip. Then it sent the clip over a private network. That is how David knew about the baby. I had taken the pregnancy test in our bathroom and whispered the word positive to myself. The device heard it. Your wedding, my dad said softly. He had been silent, letting Carter present all the evidence. Show her the pictures from the wedding. Carter put a photo on the screen from 3 years ago. I was in my wedding dress, smiling, surrounded by all of our friends and family. 12 of the people in this picture are connected to Marcus Volkov's organization, Carter said. He circled their faces in red, one by one. They were introduced to me as David's friends from college, his co-workers, or his distant cousins. In reality, they were criminals, money launderers, and one was even a suspected killer. I had danced with those people. I had hugged them. I sent them thank you cards. But the worst part, Carter said, pulling up a medical file, is this. It was from a clinic I had never visited, but it had my name on it. The date was 2 years and 1 month ago. A vitamin B12 shot, I remembered. My hand went to my left shoulder. David had told me I seemed tired and that a vitamin shot would give me more energy. Do you remember that urgent care clinic David took me to? Thinking about it now makes my skin crawl. The nurse barely gave me a glance. It was just one quick shot and we were out of there in 10 minutes. Carter told me that clinic was a front owned by a shell company that traced back to Vulov. The nurse who gave me the shot was paid $20,000. He pulled a small scanner from his case. We have to scan you, just in case my hunch about that shot is right. He did not have to say more. I stood, removed my jacket, and pulled my collar aside to expose my left shoulder. The injection site had healed without a scar, so I had forgotten all about it. Carter passed the scanner over my skin. Nothing happened at first. Then a high, urgent beeping started. His face grew grim. I have got it. What is it? I asked. He turned a screen toward me. It showed a tiny object the size of a grain of rice glowing under my skin. It was about an inch deep, exactly where I got the shot. It is a biot tracker, Carter said. Military grade GPS. It is accurate down to 3 feet and can transmit audio. Its ceramic shell lets it bypass metal detectors. And it is powered by your body heat, so it lasts as long as you are alive. The room started to feel unsteady. I grabbed the table to keep my balance. They had put a tracking device inside of me. 2 years ago, my dad said, his voice full of pain. For 2 whole years, they tracked every single place you went, every person you met. A bitter taste rose in my throat. I barely made it to a trash can before I was sick. It was like my body was trying to reject the awful truth. Someone, I think my dad, held my hair away from my face. Someone else handed me a water bottle. I rinsed my mouth and spit. Every private moment I shared with David, every shower, every doctor's appointment, every late night conversation with my best friend. They were listening, watching, and recording everything. I had been carrying a surveillance device in my own body for 2 years. We can remove it, Carter offered. We know a trusted surgeon just 15 minutes from here. It is a simple 5-minute procedure with just a local anesthetic. I straightened up and wiped my mouth. Not yet. They both just stared at me. If we take it out now, they will know we are onto them, I explained. My instincts as a lawyer were kicking in. Right now, David thinks I just went to my mother's. If the tracker suddenly goes dead, Marcus will realize I am here with you too. Show me everything you have, I said, turning to Carter and cutting my dad off. I need to see every file, every recording, every photo. To take him down, I need to understand the man I actually married. You are not taking anyone down, my dad said firmly. You are going to a safe house while Carter's people handle this. No, my voice came out much stronger than I felt. Marcus took 5 years of my life. He placed a listening device inside my body. He is holding my mom hostage. I looked my dad right in the eyes. I am not running away. I am going to fight back. The glow from the computer monitors behind us highlighted 5 years of deception. Show me everything, I repeated. After a silent, tense moment, Carter nodded and opened a new file. When my phone rang, everyone in the room went still. Mom's face was on the screen. I had left it on the table as Carter walked me through financial statements and call logs. For 45 minutes, we had been digging into David's secret life. Each new discovery felt like another twist of a knife in my gut. Then the phone began to vibrate on the metal table. The noise made us all jump. My mom's picture lit up the screen. It was taken last Christmas. She was laughing next to the tree we decorated together. Do not answer that, my dad warned. But Carter held up a hand to quiet him. Wait, this might be important. He connected a cable from the phone to his computer. Emma, answer it. Put it on speaker, but let me run the feed through my system first. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. It was a video call. I accepted and aimed the screen so Carter could see it. My mother's happy face filled the display. That was the first thing that felt completely wrong. My mom had just been at my dad's funeral service that afternoon. She was a complete wreck. My aunt had to hold her up just so she could stand. There was no way she should be smiling. Emma, honey, my mom's voice sounded so warm. Thank goodness I have been calling and calling you. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Where are you? Are you okay? I am absolutely fine, sweetie. I am at Margaret's house, you know, our neighbor 3 doors down. I just could not bear being in the house alone after the service, so Margaret invited me to stay the night with her. My mom's smile got even bigger. But David has been calling, so worried about you. He said you left the cemetery without telling anyone where you were going. Carter was typing like crazy as his software analyzed the video. Why did you not answer your phone? I asked, looking closely at her face. I called you right after the service ended. Oh, you know me, dear, my phone died. I always forget to charge it. Margaret is letting me use her phone. She leaned a little closer to the camera. Emma, please, just head back home. David loves you so much. No matter what is wrong or what you argued about, just go home and talk to him. We did not have an argument, I told her very slowly. Well, he thinks you are upset about something. He is at home right now waiting for you. My mother's expression was pleading. Please go home, my dear. Go back to David. Everything will be okay. David. She did not say your husband or that man of yours, which she usually said with a teasing tone, just David. In 5 years, my mother had never once called him just David. An alert flashed on Carter's screen, but I was already setting my own trap. Mom, I asked, my voice even, do you remember what we had for breakfast yesterday before the funeral? A very brief pause followed, just a fraction of a second, but it was there. Of course, honey, we had those delicious pancakes you made. A chill ran right through me. We had not eaten breakfast together yesterday. I was at my own house, too overwhelmed with grief to eat. Mom was at her place with my dad's sister. We definitely did not have pancakes. Mom, what was I wearing? I questioned her. Another tiny hesitation. Your black dress, sweetheart, the one with the pearl buttons on it. I had worn a suit and it was navy blue, it had no pearls. A red box now appeared around my mom's face on Carter's laptop. Beside her image, a message appeared in red text. It said, Deepfake detected. Facial mapping indicates 94% AI generation. Voice is synthesized. Minor facial cues are missing. Recommendation, video is not authentic. I stared at the screen at my smiling mother telling me to go home to David. Emma, the fake mom said, tilting her head. Are you still on the line? I think the signal is. I ended the call. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the table. I just could not hold it anymore. My hands were shaking so badly I could not even pick up the phone. That was not her, I whispered. That was not my mother. Carter's voice was grim. No, he agreed, typing furiously as he started new searches. That was a deep fake generated by artificial intelligence. They probably built it using pictures and videos from your social media and family home movies. The technology is so sophisticated now that they can make it interactive so it can respond to you in real time. The voice is almost perfect. My dad added, almost, but not quite. They could not fake the little details. They had no idea about breakfast or your clothes, Carter said, his gaze fixed on his screen. They were trying to lure you back home. They wanted you back in your house with David, a place where they have total control. He suddenly stopped typing and sat completely still. What is it? I asked. Carter looked up. His face went pale in the glow from the screens. Emma, that call was traced to your home address. He turned the laptop for me to see. I saw a map, and there was a red pin right on my street on my own house number. It came from inside your house. They are not just watching you anymore. They are there. The world started to spin again. The men who worked for Marcus Volkov were in my home, the house David and I had shared for 2 years, the place where we cooked meals, watched movies, fell in love, and dreamed about starting a family. That was the bathroom where I took a pregnancy test just 3 days ago and whispered the word positive. They were inside my home using a digital copy of my mother's face to set a deadly trap for me. I asked, how many of them are there? Carter pulled up another screen. Thermal scans from a street camera show at least 3 heat signatures in the house. There may be others out of view, my father said. 3 armed men are waiting for you. I imagined walking in completely unaware, calling for David. Would I sense the danger or would I feel safe? Would they attack immediately? Or would David pretend everything was normal to put me at ease? How exactly did Marcus intend for me to die? Carter began packing his gear and said, we need to go. They are at your house, and you are not doing what the deepfake told you to. They will realize you are onto them. They might relocate, alter their plan, or I finished his sentence for him. They might come looking for me here. Carter looked at my dad. This facility is secure, but we can't afford any chances. Richard grabbed the go bag. Emma, we need to get you to a federal safe house now. But I could only stare at my phone's dark screen where my mother's stolen face had been. They had taken her image, her voice, her very essence. They made her a lure to lead me into a trap. And my real mother, Linda Martinez, was still their captive somewhere. No, I said. Both men froze and stared at me. I am not going to run. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling but holding. They are in my house. My mother is their prisoner, and David is likely orchestrating the entire thing. I met Carter's gaze directly. You mentioned you had a plan to get my mom back. I need to hear it now. My voice was colder and harder than I had ever heard it before. They used my mother's face to try and kill me. Tell me the plan. After a tense moment, Carter gave a slow nod. Okay, he said, but I do not think you will like it. My dad showed me a photo that made the situation even more tangled. Before we discuss the plan, he said softly, there is something you should know about David, about who he was before Marcus twisted him. The image appeared on the screen. It was a young man, about 19, smiling at the camera. He had dark hair, a sharp jaw, and eyes I recognized in an instant. I had looked into those same eyes 1,000 times during dinner and in the morning light. This is Alexander Volkov, David's older brother. He looks identical to him, I whispered. He has the same eyes, my dad agreed, and the same smile on the rare occasions David shows one. Alexander was the firstborn son, Marcus's greatest pride. Carter put a second picture on the screen. It was Alexander wearing a University of Texas Longhorns jersey, his arm around a young woman at a football game. He seemed so happy and normal, just another college student. He was a junior studying business, Dad explained. His girlfriend's name was Sarah. On weekends, he volunteered at an animal shelter. My dad's voice turned hollow. I was not aware of any of that when I shot him. I just knew he had a gun and that my partner was bleeding. Tell me precisely what occurred, I demanded. Not the official version from the police report, but the real story. My dad was quiet for a very long time. May 15th, 2009 at 7:30 in the morning. We arrived at the car dealership to serve a warrant. There were 6 of us. I was the lead detective. We identified ourselves as police and entered through the front door. He looked at Alexander's photo. Alexander was in the rear office. When we went into that room, he already had his Glock aimed at us. I ordered him to drop his weapon. He fired instead. Carter spoke up. He fired 3 shots. One round struck Detective Marcus Webb in the shoulder. The other 2 missed completely. I returned fire. 1 shot. My father's hands were shaking. Center mass. He went down. We radioed for medics and tried to control the bleeding, but the bullet had hit his aorta. He died on the floor of that office before the ambulance arrived. The only sound in the storage unit was the low hum of the computers. He was 19 years old, Dad said, a frightened kid trying to act tough for his father. If he had just put down the gun, he would still be alive. He would be 34 today. He could have a wife and kids, my age, the same age David would be. And Marcus held you responsible, I said. Marcus held me responsible for doing my job. The official investigation took 6 weeks. Every witness agreed that Alexander fired his weapon first. The shooting was ruled self-defense. But to Marcus, my dad's voice broke, I was a murderer. Carter moved a little closer. When Alexander died, David disappeared. He was just a 21-year-old student at the University of Texas, a perfect kid. We thought he was hiding with his father. We were wrong. Marcus sent him to Europe. For 12 years, I said, recalling what they told me. 12 years of intense training, Carter added. Our sources have helped us piece it together. He was in Moscow, Prague, and Budapest. Marcus used his old Soviet military contacts. We think he was conditioning David. It was not just combat training, it was psychological. He taught him to build a false life, to get close to a target and earn their complete trust. Yes, he turned him into a living weapon, Dad said quietly. The awful truth of it crashed down on me. David, grieving his brother at 21, was molded by his father into a tool of revenge. For 12 years, a college kid became a killer, all for his father's grudge. But you have to see this, Carter said, opening a new file. In the last 6 months, since we knew who David was, we have watched him. And Emma, David has had at least 3 perfect chances to kill you. Times you were alone and vulnerable, where it could have looked like a tragic accident. My stomach twisted into a knot. 3? 4 weeks ago, you jogged in Zilka Park alone at 6 in the morning. David knew your route. He could have easily followed you and attacked you on a quiet path. It would have looked like a random assault. Carter pulled up another document. 2 months ago, your car's brake line had a slow leak. You took it to a repair shop. We checked their security tapes. David was in that garage the night before holding tools. He could have cut the line completely. Instead, he just damaged it enough for you to find it. And 3 months ago, Dad added, his voice tight with emotion, you had that terrible stomach flu. David brought you soup and gave you medicine. Carter's team checked the medicine later. They found nothing wrong with it. If he had wanted to poison you, that was the perfect moment. I just stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. He was ordered to kill me, but he did not. 3 different times, Carter repeated. And maybe others we missed. David has lived with you for 5 years and been your husband for 3. He has had countless chances, but he never took one. The real question is, why? We are not entirely sure, Carter said, but we have a strong theory. He opened an audio player. This was recorded 3 years ago. We had a bug on one of Marcus's men. We captured this call between Marcus and David. He hit the play button. The cold, commanding voice of Marcus, with his heavy Eastern European accent, filled the space. You have been there for 2 years. When are you going to finish the job? There was a brief silence. Then I heard David's voice. It was younger, but it was him. Soon, I just need more time. More time? Marcus's tone turned cruel. I gave you 12 years. I made you into what you are today, and you repay me by hesitating? She is not the person you described to me. She is different. She is Richard Martinez's daughter. That is all you need to know. You will make him watch as she dies, just like I watched Alexander die. It will be slow and very painful. You will ruin everything she cares about and everyone she knows, and then you will kill her while Richard is forced to watch. After a moment, he said, Do this for me, or you are no longer my son. The recording ended. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The casual cruelty in Marcus's voice was horrifying. To him, I was just an object, a piece in his sick game of revenge, and David's voice sounded so lost and torn. That call was 3 years ago, Dad said softly. It was right about the time David proposed to you. He has been stalling, I whispered. For 3 years, he has been ignoring his own father. That means one of 2 things, Carter said. Either David is planning something far more complicated, or, I finished his sentence, he really fell in love with me. That thought gave me no comfort at all. In fact, it made everything feel so much worse, because even if David loved me, he still built our life on a foundation of lies. He deceived me. He married me as part of a mission, and now my mother was a prisoner. We were on the run, and David was out there trapped between his father's orders and his feelings for me. My father saw the pain on my face and said, That does not make him safe. It makes him more dangerous. A man torn like that is unpredictable. I know, I told him, but when I looked at Alexander's picture, at that young face with David's eyes, I felt such sadness. 2 brothers. One died at 19 because he panicked and pulled a trigger. The other was made into a weapon of revenge, caught between love and duty. Markus Volkov destroyed both of his sons, and now he was trying to destroy me. The storage unit was turned into a command center when the FBI team showed up. 6 agents in full gear walked in, carrying cases and setting up computers. The small space quickly filled with people, and the air grew thick with tension and the crackle of radios. Carter put a large image on a screen. It showed the heat signature of a building. Two bright orange shapes glowed against the blue background. Your mother is right here, he said, pointing to the larger shape. An old meat packing factory on East Riverside. We have had eyes on it for the last 2 hours. I stepped closer to see the image better. She was in there with only one other person. No! Carter's face grew serious. Look closer at the second shape. The smaller orange figure was about half the size of the first. It was not an adult. I held my breath. That is a child. Yes? What child? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Whose child is in there with my mother? Carter pulled up a file on a different laptop. It was a birth certificate from the Texas Department of State Health Services. The name on it was Liam Alexander Volkov, born March 12, 2016. The mother was Sophia Grace Miller. The father was David Marcus Volkov. My entire world just stopped. David had a son, a 7-year-old boy I never knew existed. Sophia Miller died 3 years ago, Carter said quietly. It was a car accident, a single vehicle on a country road near San Antonio. She lost control of the car and crashed into a ravine. The official report called it an accident. But Marcus killed her, my dad finished. Once David was with Emma, Sophia became a loose end. I could not stop staring at the birth certificate. Liam Alexander Volkov. His middle name was Alexander for David's brother. A memory from 2 weeks ago suddenly returned. David had brought a shy 7-year-old boy to our house for dinner. This is Liam, David had said, ruffling the boy's hair. He is my friend Tom's son. You know, Tom from the real estate agency. He had a family emergency and asked if we could watch Liam for a bit. I had been a little surprised. David had only mentioned Tom a few times and I had never met the man. Sure, I said, smiling at the quiet little boy. Of course, I made macaroni and cheese. We played a card game at our kitchen table. Liam was shy, but he started to laugh when I complained about having to draw 4 cards. He called me Miss Emma and politely thanked me for dinner before David took him home. Later that night, I asked David, when do I finally get to meet this mysterious Tom? For just a second, David tensed up. I almost missed it. He travels a lot, he said. He works with clients overseas. I will introduce you to him someday. I let it go. Now I understood the real reason. That was David's own son, his own child. And I had fed him dinner and played games with him with absolutely no idea who he really was. David brought him to your house 2 weeks ago, Carter said, confirming what I was thinking. We saw it on our surveillance video. That was the only time in 5 years that David ever mixed his two lives. We think he was trying to. He paused. We think he wanted you to know Liam, so that if Marcus ever forced his hand, you would fight to protect that child. Where has Liam been living? I asked. If Sophia has been dead for 3 years. He was with a nanny in a house Marcus owns in Georgetown. He was kept away from everyone and was homeschooled. David visited him 2 times a week. The nanny reported him missing this morning, around the time of your father's funeral. Marcus had kidnapped his own grandson, a 7-year-old boy. Why? My voice was barely a whisper. Why would Marcus take his own grandson? As insurance, Carter said with a grim look, to make absolutely sure that David follows his orders this time. Carter explained Marcus could see David hesitating, unable to act. The threatening phone call, the men at my house, it was all Marcus, not David. Marcus was forcing a final showdown because he no longer trusted his own son. He showed us another image on the screen, a floor plan of the meat packing plant. Red X marks were scattered across it. We believe Marcus gave David a final choice. He had to kill me and Richard before sunrise at 6 in the morning. That was only 8 hours away. If David refused, Marcus would kill Liam. Carter looked directly at me. David's father was threatening to murder his own 7-year-old grandson unless David murdered his wife. The sheer cruelty was difficult to process. Marcus had ruined Alexander, manipulated David, killed Sophia, and was now using a child to get his revenge. So what is our plan? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We will move in just before dawn, Carter said, at 4 in the morning. The FBI team will go into the plant, rescue your mother and the boy, and neutralize any threats. But we first need something to lure Marcus's men away from them. A diversion, I repeated. My dad then spoke. I will do it. I will go to Marcus and tell him I surrender. I will offer myself in exchange for Linda. That will get his attention while your team prepares. No, the word was firm and absolute. Everyone turned to look at me. If you go, Dad, Marcus will kill you on sight. Then he will kill Mom just to be vicious. I stood up, fighting to keep my legs from shaking. It has to be me. Emma, there is no way, my dad protested. Marcus wants to see you suffer. I cut my father off. He wants you to watch me die. If I go in there and give myself up, he will keep me alive just long enough for you to see it. That will give Carter's team the time they need to get inside. You are proposing to be the bait, Carter said plainly. I am saying I am the only option that buys us more time. I looked at my dad. You walk in there and you are dead in 30 seconds. If I go in, Marcus will turn it into a grand spectacle. And while he is distracted with his performance, the FBI can get Mom and Liam to safety. And what happens after that? Dad asked, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus will kill you anyway. Then the FBI will shoot Marcus before he can, I replied with more confidence than I felt. Carter and my dad exchanged a long look. There is another problem, Carter said at last. It is David. We are not certain of his location. He is not at your house with Marcus's men. He is not at the plant with your mother. He is somewhere out there and we cannot guess what he will do. That is why I need to speak with him, I answered. Before any of this moves forward, I have to know if David is on our side or if he will try to kill us. And I know only one way to find that out. I pulled out my phone, which had been silent for so long. The same phone David had called repeatedly before we turned it off. I looked at Carter. You can trace this call, can you not? If I call him, you can find his location. In less than 30 seconds, Carter confirmed he could. Then I am making the call. I looked at my dad, at the fear and powerlessness on his face. I have to know if Marcus has completely broken David or if any part of the man I married still exists. And if he is completely broken, Dad asked in a low voice. Then I will know that I am walking into that plant alone, I replied. But at least I will know the truth. I found David's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the green call icon. After 5 years of marriage, filled with lies and surveillance, I was about to have a genuine conversation with my husband. I pressed the button to call. My thumb was just inches from the screen when Carter quickly reached out and stopped my hand. Wait. His voice was sharp. The tracking device is still active. If you call him now, Marcus will hear every single word through the audio feed. He will know our entire plan. Oh. I looked down at my phone, then to my shoulder where that horrible device had been for 2 years. We need to remove it, Carter insisted. Right now, before you make that call. Agent Elena Torres stepped forward. She appeared to be in her mid-30s with dark hair pulled back, and she wore blue medical gloves. She had arrived with the tactical unit, but I had not really paid her any attention until now. I am the team's field medic, she explained, her voice calm and professional. I can remove the device right here. The procedure is very simple. 5 minutes with a local anesthetic. You will barely feel anything. I asked, how long does it take for the anesthetic to work? 2 minutes for the injection to be given. 3 more minutes for the area to become completely numb. We did not have 5 minutes. I looked at Carter. How close are those vehicles you mentioned? His face grew tense. We are not sure of their exact distance. If Marcus is sending a team from the same location as the men at your house, they will be here in 15 to 20 minutes. There was no time to wait for anesthetic. I took off my jacket and pulled my collar aside, revealing my left shoulder. Just get it out, Elena. That is not a wise idea. I interrupted Torres. Do it now. If you do not, I will call David with the tracker still inside of me, and Marcus will hear every single word. Torres glanced at Carter, who gave a slight confirming nod. She laid out sterile instruments on a metal tray. A scalpel, forceps, gauze, and antiseptic. Her efficient movements were almost more terrifying than the sharp blade itself. Dad, I said, my voice sounding stronger than I had ever heard it. Come over here. Stand where you can see everything. He moved closer reluctantly, his face already pale. I need you to watch this, I told him. I want you to see the real price of your decisions. Not as an idea, but in reality. I want you to see what they did to me, Emma said, observing him. Torres cleaned my shoulder with a cold, stinging liquid. The chemical scent burned my nose. This is going to hurt, she said softly. The chip is about 1 inch deep underneath the muscle. She promised to work quickly but said the pain was unavoidable. Just do it, I repeated. The scalpel sliced into my skin. I believed I was prepared for it. I was mistaken. The pain was immediate and sharp, a profound wrongness that made my vision blur. This was not an accident. This was a person cutting me open to remove something that should have never been there. My dad gasped, a sound like a choked sob. I gritted my teeth and forced the words out. Keep watching. Torres worked with fast, steady hands. I felt a pulling sensation, the feeling of something being moved deep beneath my skin. Warm blood trickled down my arm. Almost there, Torres whispered. Then I heard a tiny click of metal touching ceramic as the tool clamped onto the chip. Got it. She pulled it free and I finally allowed myself to look. It was like a single grain of rice, smaller than my pinky fingernail. The casing was a dark, innocent looking blue, now coated with my blood. 2 years. That thing had been inside my body for 2 years. Torres pressed a clean cloth to the wound, applying firm pressure. It is a shallow cut and a clean removal. You avoided any major arteries. You will need stitches later, but this will have to do for now. She taped a fresh bandage around my shoulder and handed me back my jacket. A sharp flash of pain shot through me as I put it on. Carter held the chip with a pair of tweezers, examining it under a magnifying glass. It is a military-grade bio-tracker. It has GPS accurate within 3 feet, plus it can transmit short audio bursts. He pointed to a tiny component. It has voice-activated recording. The trigger words were your name, FBI, and David Marcus. Every time you said one of them, it recorded for 60 seconds and sent the file over a secure cellular signal. I whispered, for 2 years. He nodded. That is how Marcus knew you were pregnant, how he knew about our investigation, how he knew absolutely everything. The immense weight of that betrayal felt suffocating. Every private conversation, every sweet moment, every time I whispered David's name in the dark had been recorded. Every discussion with my dad about my work, every mention of the FBI cases I was defending, all of it was sent and analyzed. Suddenly, alarms blared from Carter's laptop. A tactical agent pointed to a monitor showing the building's entrance. Security breach. 3 black sport utility vehicles without license plates were speeding toward us. They are 2 minutes away. Carter's voice was grim. They are here. Marcus heard everything we just discussed. He knows we are with the FBI, he knows our plan, and he knows Emma is working with us. A team is on its way to handle this, he announced. The room instantly became a hive of activity. Agents secured their weapons, donned helmets, and moved to the doorway. Carter turned to me. We need to leave now. Use separate cars and routes. Emma, you ride with me. I looked at him and said, no. I reached for the tracking chip on the tray, still sticky with my blood. I held it in the air for everyone to see. I am holding on to this. The room fell silent. Carter spoke first. Emma, that is a piece of evidence. I corrected him. It is my advantage. Marcus thinks this is still inside of me. He believes he can track my every move and hear my every word. This gives us an upper hand. My father's voice was unsteady. Or it is a death sentence. Emma, please, you have endured enough. I stopped him. This is my decision, I said, my hand closing tightly around the chip. The blood made it slick, but my resolve was solid. It is not your call and it is not the FBI's, it is mine. I stared directly at Carter. I will go to that meatpacking plant this evening. I will bring this with me so Marcus will be certain he knows my location and can hear whatever I say, my father protested. That is madness. If you go there with that chip or not, Marcus is going to. I finished his thought. Marcus is going to gloat. He will want a big spectacle. He will want you to see it all. Is that not what you told me? He wants to make you suffer. I locked eyes with my dad. So let us give him precisely what he wants. I will walk in there by myself thinking I am being followed and acting like I have already lost. While he is enjoying his moment of triumph, your FBI team can rescue Mom and Liam. Carter studied my face for a long moment. You realize that even with the element of surprise and a full tactical unit, your chances of survival are incredibly low. I am aware, he continued, and you are still offering to do this. I corrected him again. I am not offering, I am deciding. There is a very big difference. The alarms continued to blare. The approaching vehicles were less than a minute away. We need to move, an agent insisted. Immediately. I raised my phone. David's name was still on the display. I looked at Carter. Call him, I commanded. Call him this instant before that team arrives. I have to know if his plan is to help me or to finish the job. Carter grabbed a small listening device and gave a firm nod. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, then a second time. After the third ring, David picked up. Emma. His voice sounded strained and desperate. Emma, where are you? I have been trying to reach you for hours. I know that you know. I know you know the entire story. The whole room went still as David's voice filled the space. Carter had patched the call to the team's headsets, amplifying it so everyone could hear. 6 federal agents, my father and I, all listened to my husband's panicked breaths. Emma, he repeated my name like a prayer. Where are you? Please just tell me that you are okay. I made my voice sound detached and all business. I am somewhere you will never find me, and I know the whole truth, David. I know about Marcus. I know about Alexander. I know what they ordered you to do. A long pause followed before he finally spoke. I know you do. I realized it the moment you left the cemetery without me. The tracker stopped transmitting your conversations an hour ago. They removed it, did they not? So he had been listening. or Marcus was using him to listen. Tell me about Liam, I demanded. My voice remained steady, even though my heart was breaking into pieces. Your 7-year-old son, the boy you claimed was your friend Tom's child just 2 weeks ago. David's breathing hitched. When he spoke again, his voice was shattered. I brought him to you because I wanted to save him. I hoped that if you met him and grew to love him as I knew you would fight to protect him when everything fell apart. I repeated his words. When everything fell apart, you mean when you finally got around to killing me? No, I mean when I could finally figure out how to keep you both safe. His voice cracked completely. Emma, I could not go through with it. For 6 months, I have been searching for an escape from this. 6 months of making up excuses, of putting it off, of telling Marcus I just needed more time, that the moment was not right. He then added, and he knew I was not with him any longer. I stated it plainly, because you fell in love with me. Yes, his answer was immediate. God help me, yes, this whole thing was supposed to be an act. I was supposed to get close to you, to make you trust me, and then I would wait for the order from Marcus. But at some point in that first year, I do not know how it happened, it was not an act anymore. By our wedding day, I was in too far to get out, but I was too much of a coward to tell you what was really happening. I heard a sound on his end of the line, a small child crying softly. Is Liam with you? I asked. Yes. David's voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. Marcus has him. He has your mother and him at the plant. He is forcing me to watch on a video feed while a gun is pointed at my son's head. A cold dread filled my stomach. Where are you right now? It does not matter. I am not with them, but Marcus made sure I can see everything. His voice broke again. Every time Liam calls for me, every time he asks why his dad is not there, Marcus gave me one final option. Kill you and your father before the sun comes up, or he will kill Liam. My own father is willing to kill his own grandson to force my hand. I knew he was not lying. I could hear it all in his voice. The terror, the powerlessness, the pure agony was all there. This was not the confident, charming David I had known for 5 years. This was a broken man, a man forced to watch his own father threaten to murder his son. I spoke slowly. David, you mentioned you were searching for an escape for 6 months. What changed? Why did you begin searching 6 months ago? There was another silence. Then he said, that is when your father's FBI contact found me. Agent Carter confronted me, David explained, his laugh laced with sadness. He said he knew who I really was. I was sure he was going to arrest me, but instead he offered me a deal. If I helped them stop Marcus and testified, Liam and I would get a new life under witness protection. I looked at Carter, who confirmed the story with a nod. But you turned him down, I stated. I could not accept it, David said. Taking that deal meant telling you the truth. It meant seeing you look at me with the same disgust I imagine you have right now. I could not bear that. I kept searching for another way out, a way to save Liam and keep you safe without losing you. There is no other way, I told him, my voice flat. I know that now, he replied, his voice hollow. There never was. Marcus has forced my hand and my time is up. I have to choose between the woman I love and the son I have already failed. In the background, Marcus called out, David, are you still on that phone? David spoke urgently. I have to go. Emma, please stay where you are. Do not come home. Do not go near the plant. Marcus will kill you on sight. What if I want to come? I asked. What if I am ready to trade myself for Mom and Liam? No! His voice was a raw, desperate cry. Emma, you cannot do that. The meat packing plant on East Riverside, I said, my voice steady and strong. I will be there at 4 in the morning. Let Marcus know I am coming alone. Tell him I want to make a deal. David protested. Emma, you cannot, you do not understand. Oh, I understand everything perfectly. I glanced at my dad, then at Carter and his team gathered around us. Tell him I will trade myself for Mom and Liam, me for them. That is what he always wanted, right? To watch Richard Martinez's daughter die right in front of him. You are walking into a trap, David warned. Then I had better have a very good plan, I replied. Marcus's voice boomed in the background. David, hang up that phone now, David whispered. I have to go, Emma. I repeated my instruction. 4 in the morning. Do not be late. The line went dead. The silence in the room was heavy, with every pair of eyes fixed on me. Carter broke the silence first, his voice tight with anger. You just painted a target on your back. You gave Marcus the time and the place, and you promised him you would be alone. You just handed him everything he wants on a silver platter? Good, I said, setting the phone down. That was exactly my intention. This is not some kind of game, he warned. I know it is not a game, I shot back. It is a trap. I am the bait. While Marcus is busy with me, your team will get Mom and Liam out. That was the plan, was it not? You were about to suggest it before I took control. Carter's jaw was set. He glanced at my dad, who looked like he had aged 10 years. An agent spoke up softly. She has a point. With Marcus focused on one target, it gives us an advantage. She is not an advantage, my dad said, his voice shaking. She is my daughter, and Mom is your wife, I countered. And Liam is a 7-year-old boy who does not belong in this mess. We are out of good options, Dad. We have to pick the bad option that causes the least amount of harm. I turned to face Carter. So, tell me the plan for 4 in the morning. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. All right, he said, but you follow my instructions to the letter. If you play the hero for 1 second, people will die. I understand. He pulled up a blueprint of the meatpacking plant on a large screen. This is how we are going to get your mother out, he explained. And if we are lucky, we will get you out alive as well. We had 4 hours until the meeting. Carter's team of 6 agents in dark gear huddled around the plans. My dad stood rigidly nearby while I was still in the same blood-stained shirt from the funeral. A small wire was taped to my skin, and I tried not to think about the baby I was carrying. East Riverside Meatpacking, built in 1987, Carter began, pointing at the screen. It is a one-story building with very few exits. Marcus chose it because it is isolated and difficult to approach without being seen. The diagram showed a maze of loading docks, processing rooms, and freezers. A large red X marked the spot where my mom and Liam were being held. Emma will enter the building alone, Carter stated. She will be equipped with audio and a GPS tracker. Your only job is to keep them talking for 20 minutes. That should give our snipers enough time to get into position on the roof while our other teams breach the loading bay and the south wall. What if Marcus searches her for a wire? One of the agents asked. Carter's expression was grim. The transmitter is military grade. It is made of ceramic and powered by her body heat, so a scanner will not detect it. If they order you to undress, he said, looking directly at me, you hit the panic button. I nodded, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Sergeant Rodriguez, Carter said to the sniper, a man with a shaved head and remarkably steady hands. You will have a thermal view of David Volo from the northwest roof. You know your orders. Rodriguez's voice was flat and professional. If he aims a weapon at the target, I will take the shot. No, I said instinctively. David would never hurt me. Carter looked at me with a hint of pity. Ms. Martinez, David Voloff spent 5 years earning your trust. He knows how you like your coffee. He knows your deepest fears. That does not make him safe. It makes him the most dangerous man in that building. The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. I had told David everything. He knew every single one of my weaknesses. Emma, my dad pleaded, his voice cracking. Let me go instead. Marcus wants me. This is my fault. I will trade myself for your mother and the boy. I met his gaze. No, sweetheart, Marcus does not want you dead. He wants you to watch me die, Dad. That is his ultimate revenge. He wants to make you live with my death, just like he has lived with Alexander's death for 15 years. Me going in there by myself is the one thing he will never see coming. Carter nodded slowly in agreement. She is right. Emma's involvement changes the entire situation. Marcus was prepared for Richard. He was not prepared for his daughter. My father looked defeated as he stepped back. Okay. Carter then pulled a small black device from his tactical vest. It was flat and smooth, about the size of a quarter. This is your panic button. The wire will transmit audio automatically, but if you are in immediate danger, if you even see a weapon, you squeeze this twice, very quickly. That is the signal for us to move in. We will breach the building in under 30 seconds. He pressed it into my palm and I felt its solid click, twice. Thermal scans show 2 hostages in the freezer, Carter continued, pointing to a laptop screen. 2 heat signatures, 1 adult and 1 child, Linda Martinez and Liam Volov. We have counted 4 armed hostiles, but there could be more. Marcus may not even be there. He often prefers to manage these things from a distance. What about bombs? I asked. Carter's silence was all the answer I needed. Oh my God, I whispered. We will have a bomb expert on standby. But Emma, if you see any device, any wires, timers, or vests, you signal us immediately. Do not try to reason with them if explosives are involved. I nodded, but my hands began to shake uncontrollably. Agent Torres, the medic, stepped forward. Her face was kind but serious. Miss Martinez, I need to tell you something. You're about 6 weeks pregnant. Your blood pressure is high at 140/95. The stress of this situation, combined with the adrenaline, puts you at a serious risk of a miscarriage. A heavy silence fell over the room. How serious is the risk? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 20 to 30%. The risk increases if you experience any physical trauma, like a fall, or if your blood pressure remains high for too long. I placed a hand over my stomach. There was no visible sign yet, just a secret I had held for 2 weeks. It was the baby David had somehow known about before I told a soul. Then I will just have to make sure nothing goes wrong, I said quietly. Torres did not look convinced. My father looked terrified. Carter checked his watch. It will be dark at 0400 hours. Emma, you will drive your own car. Marcus will be looking for a convoy. We will hang back a half mile behind you with our lights off. You will park in the main lot and walk to the south entrance. Once you're inside, you are on your own for 20 minutes. Then we will make our move. What if David... I could not finish the sentence. If David Voloff raises a weapon to you, Sergeant Rodriguez will neutralize the threat. I am sorry, Miss Martinez, but I cannot bet your life on the hope that a man trained by Marcus Volkov for 12 years will choose love over his own survival. I wanted to argue. I wanted to believe in the man who held me on our wedding night and wished we could stay like that forever. But in that moment, I knew Carter was right. That man I married might have been a total fabrication. I understand, I replied. Carter handed me a lightweight tactical vest made of Kevlar. Put this on under your jacket. It may not deflect a rifle round, but it might protect you from a handgun. I slipped it on, feeling its solid weight against my ribs, covering the wire and shielding the tiny new life growing inside of me. Carter spoke again. One more thing. Once you are inside, we will go completely silent on the radio. No talking, no updates. We cannot let Marcus intercept our communications. You will be completely alone until you give us the signal. I added, or until 20 minutes have passed. He confirmed, or until 20 minutes have passed. I turned to my dad. His face was white and he looked like he had aged a decade in just one night. I love you, I told him. He wrapped his arms around me tightly and I could feel his body trembling. Come back to me, he whispered into my hair. Please, Emma, you have to come back. I stepped away, squared my shoulders, and met Carter's eyes. Let us get this started. The city streets were empty as 3 FBI cars trailed me from a half a mile back. I could not spot them. Carter promised me they would be running dark. No lights, no engine noise, but I knew they were there. They felt like shadows in my rear-view mirror, like phantoms moving in step with me. Unit 1 to Principal, Carter's voice came through the small earpiece in my hair. We have eyes on you. We are maintaining our distance. I did not reply. The wire would transmit my voice, but I needed the silence. I had to focus my thoughts. The dashboard of the Honda glowed a soft green. It was 2:47 in the morning. I had 13 minutes to reach the plant. That left 73 minutes before the 4 o'clock deadline Marcus had set. I drove along the quiet roads of Austin, passing places filled with our history. South Congress, where David and I had our third date. The small coffee shop on East 6th, where we supposedly met by coincidence 5 years earlier. The shop was closed now, but I could see him inside. He was at a table by the window with his laptop, and he glanced up with a shy smile as I spilled my latte all over his work. I was so mortified. He just told me it was fine, that he was not working on anything important. That was not true. He was studying a file on me, learning all of my routines. He was rehearsing how to infect my life like a disease. But I did not know that at the time. I simply laughed, bought him a new drink, and we talked for 2 hours straight. He had a perfect line for everything, from his choice of words to how he tilted his head, even timing the comfortable silences between us. I truly thought we were destined to be together. I drove by the West Lynn bookstore where, a year later, he dropped to one knee. He proposed right there among the poetry and fiction, his voice shaking, the ring box trembling in his hand. Emma Martinez, you are my whole world. Please be my wife. Tears ruined my makeup as I covered my mouth, only able to nod because I could not speak. Other customers clapped for us. A stranger even took our picture. I posted it on social media with the caption, I am the luckiest woman alive. How could I have been so incredibly naive? Our wedding was perfect. We got married in October under twinkling lights at a venue in the hill country. My father, wearing his dress uniform, walked me down the aisle while my mother cried happy tears in the front row. When I saw David at the altar in his dark suit, with a bashful smile and eyes full of tears, I knew he was the man for me. I was completely unaware of the 3 men in the back row, their Volkov Enterprises tattoos hidden by their long-sleeved shirts. I never questioned why his family was so small, so quiet, and so determined to avoid any cameras. Later in our honeymoon suite, he pulled me close and whispered, You are too good for me. I kissed him and replied, "You are perfect." He was telling me the truth, but I did not understand what he really meant at the time. My car idled at the red light on Riverside Drive. I was the only one at the intersection, and I placed a hand on my stomach. At 6 weeks, you were just a small cluster of cells, but you were already a person, already a part of me, and a part of David. What am I supposed to do with you? I whispered. How could I bring you into this world? Knowing your family history, knowing what your father had done. The light turned green, but my car did not move. I will give you a life, I promised, my voice breaking with emotion. I will choose you, no matter how hard or painful this gets. None of this is your fault. I finally pressed the accelerator. Just 2 weeks ago, David had brought Liam to our house. He is my friend's son, he explained casually, dropping a bag full of toys on the floor. I am just watching him for a few days. I hope that is okay. Liam was a quiet and observant 7-year-old boy. He had his father's dark eyes, but a softer, more delicate face. I made him some macaroni and cheese, and we played a card game together on the rug. He fell asleep on the couch as we watched a movie, so I draped a blanket over him and gently brushed back his hair. David watched us from the kitchen doorway. When he caught my eye, his face was filled with a powerful emotion I could not quite place. It might have been hope, or maybe it was sadness. You would be a great mother, he said softly. I simply smiled and said, "Perhaps someday." He quickly looked away. Everything clicked into place. He was seeing me with his own son, a boy whose life was a secret, a boy Marcus was using as leverage. He was imagining a different life, a real one where we could be a family without all the lies, a life where his brother was not a ghost buried for 2 decades. But that life was never possible for us. I finally understood that David was a victim too. He was just 21 when Alexander died. Broken and vulnerable, Marcus molded him into a weapon over 12 years of manipulation and rage. Marcus taught him to hate my father, to infiltrate my life, and to destroy me, but David still made his own choices. He accepted the mission. He stayed, he became my husband, held me close, and lied to me for 5 years. Even now, holding a gun with his son's life at stake, he had other options. He could have told me the truth. He could have run away. He could have chosen me. He did not. Carter, I'm 10 minutes out, I said into the comms. His voice came back. Copy that. Teams are in position. Rodriguez has the roof. You are clear to proceed. I steered the car onto East Riverside deep into the industrial park. The world outside was a maze of wire fences, gravel lots, and silent, dark warehouses. The meatpacking plant rose ahead, a low concrete box with a single bulb glowing over the south entrance. The time was 3:42 in the morning, which put me 18 minutes early. I planned it that way. Arriving first gave me a small measure of control, a feeling I was leading this, not just executing Marcus's plan. When you have no power, you seize every tiny advantage. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. The screen showed a text from David. I am sorry for all of this. My throat grew tight. I ignored it. It vibrated a second time. Another message. This was never what I wanted. I shut the phone off and shoved it into my jacket pocket. Two black sport utility vehicles were parked near the loading dock. I pulled into a spot about 30 yards from the building, killed the engine, and listened to the silence. I had a clear view of the entrance. It was a rusted metal door with no window, and it was slightly ajar. Our target is stationary, Carter reported in my earpiece. We hold our position. We start a 20-minute clock the moment you are inside. I unbuckled my seatbelt and felt for the alert button in my pocket. Two quick presses would bring the team in 30 seconds. I felt the weight of the armored vest under my jacket and the recording device at my side, my mind filled with images of my mother tied to a chair and of Liam with a bomb strapped to his small body. I saw my father in the command center, helpless as he watched events on a screen. I thought of the new life I was carrying, too small to know fear and too fragile to protect. I'm going in, I announced. The cold, pre-dawn air hit me as I stepped out of the car. Gravel crunched under my boots. In the distance, a semi-truck rumbled down the highway. The south door creaked open wider, revealing David in the frame. He looked broken, with hollow eyes, a patchy beard, and shoulders slumped by the weight of his choices. He said nothing, just raised a hand toward me, palm out, a gesture of surrender. I walked toward him. When I reached the doorway, he whispered, "I am so sorry." I looked into his eyes, the same eyes I had loved, the ones that looked so much like Alexander's in that photograph my father kept. I did not answer. I stepped past him into the building's darkness. The door groaned shut on its rusted hinges behind me. A deep, metallic cold filled the air, thick with the smell of old blood and raw meat. Chains with sharp steel hooks hung from the ceiling. The concrete floor was slick with dark, wet patches. Carter's voice was a low murmur in my ear. Subject is inside. Your mother is 40 feet straight ahead. We have eyes on three hostiles in elevated positions. Timer starts now, 20 minutes on the clock. I moved forward slowly, one hand on the wall for balance, the other near the button in my pocket. I entered the main processing room, a silent, chilling space filled with conveyor belts, steel tables, and giant saws. Then I saw her. My mother was sitting under a single work light. Her hands were bound with plastic ties and her mouth was sealed with duct tape. Her face was swollen and bruised with a cut on her lip, but her eyes were open and alert. She saw me and made a desperate, muffled sound, a clear warning. I ran to her, dropped to my knees, and ripped the tape from her mouth. Emma, it's a trap! She screamed. At that moment, blinding floodlights ignited overhead, washing the entire plant in harsh white light. I spun around. David stood about 15 feet away, holding a pistol pointed at the floor. His face was a mask of pain, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw clenched. He had the look of a man drowning in his own choices. I am so sorry, he said, his voice a ragged whisper. I glanced above him to a metal catwalk that circled the room 30 feet up. Three men in tactical gear stood there, their rifles trained on David, not me. I could hear one speaking into his radio. Target acquired. Female is alone and she is wired. David was a puppet here. He was trapped. One wrong move and those men would take him down. His hand trembled as he looked from the catwalk down to me, his eyes full of panic. Where is the boy? I demanded. David's gaze flickered to a dark corner of the room. I followed his eyes and saw a small boy cowering behind a stack of wooden pallets. He was rocking back and forth, hugging his knees with his hands pressed over his ears. Liam! He was humming a low, constant tune. It was the sound a terrified child makes to escape the world. On his back was a military-style pack, the kind that held the bomb. Oh no, I whispered. Emma! My mother yelled. Under my chair! I looked down and saw it. Taped securely to the legs of her chair was a gray block of explosive with wires, a pressure plate, and a blank digital screen. It is a bomb, my mother said, her voice shaking. If I stand up, it goes off. The trigger is set to 5 pounds. I weigh 140. A cold dread filled my stomach. Liam's backpack is the same, David said, his voice cracking. It is rigged with a pressure switch. If he takes it off, his words died in his throat. I forced myself to breathe and think. I needed to find a way out of this. Let them go, I said to David. Take me. Marcus wants me, not them. David just shook his head, his face a picture of despair. He wants all of us. He wants your father to watch. A large television screen on the far wall suddenly came to life. The face of Marcus Vulov appeared. He was a man in his mid-50s with graying hair and an expensive suit. He sat in a wood-paneled library holding a glass of whiskey safe and far away. His smile was cold and exact. Miss Martinez, his voice was smooth as silk. Thank you for joining us. I stared into the camera. Let my mother and the boy go. Your problem is with my father. Marcus chuckled softly. You think you are in a position to negotiate? You are not in control here, Miss Martinez. He leaned toward the camera, his eyes narrowing. You are the price he has to pay. I kept my voice steady. Are the bombs real, the ones on my mother and Liam? Marcus's smile widened. Does it matter? You believe they are real. David believes they are real. Fear is a far more elegant weapon than C4, Miss Martinez. A real bomb only ends a life, but the idea of a bomb creates helplessness. It creates panic. It forces people to do the unthinkable. He took a slow sip of his drink. I am not a monster. I have no desire to harm children with explosives. My goal is for your father to see you die at the hands of the man you love. Bombs are so impersonal. So what do I want? I want Richard Martinez to feel the same loss I felt 15 years ago. I want him to watch his child die. I want that image to burn behind his eyes for the rest of his life. He needs to learn that true justice does not come from a badge or a courtroom. It is paid in blood. The official report said Alexander's death was justified. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. Your father shot my 19-year-old son in the chest. He let him bleed out on the pavement and they called it justified. He spat the word out like poison. There is no justification for killing someone's child. I looked at Liam still humming and rocking in the corner. Then why are you doing this to your own son? I asked. Marcus's expression was unreadable. David knows what he must do. He has known for 12 years. Family demands sacrifice. My son understands this. David looked like he had been struck. The pistol in his hand drooped. I cannot do it, he whispered. Marcus, I cannot. Yes, you will, Marcus replied, his voice hard as steel. Or you can watch Liam die instead. The choice is yours. One of the gunmen on the catwalk aimed his rifle at Liam. A tiny red laser dot appeared on the boy's back, a perfect circle on his green shirt. Liam kept humming, lost in his own world. No. David took a step forward, raising his pistol not at me but at the gunman. Instantly, all three rifles swiveled to point at him. Red dots bloomed on his chest. David, don't, I shouted. He froze, his breathing ragged. Put the gun down, I said softly. Please, this is not how you save him. David's eyes found mine. He looked at me the way he had on our wedding night, and in his gaze I saw everything he had been hiding: love, shame, and a terrible deep sadness. This was never what I wanted for you, he said. I know, I told him. He let the pistol fall to his side. Marcus leaned back in his chair and smiled. How touching, but we are running out of time. The terms are simple. David shoots you. Richard watches it happen on the private feed I provided him. Your mother and Liam walk free. He took another sip of his drink. If David refuses, I will detonate both devices. Everyone in this room will perish. Richard will still be watching. The only thing that changes is whether you die a clean death or a fiery one. That is not a choice, I said. No, Marcus agreed. It is justice. Behind me, my mother whispered, Emma, the button. But I could not press it. Not now. A 30-second response time was too long with active bombs. I needed more time. What happens to David after? I asked Marcus. If he pulls that trigger, are you going to let him live? Marcus's smile just got wider. Absolutely not. David dies too, but Liam gets to live. That is the trade. David squeezed his eyes shut. I glanced at the little boy, his hands clamped over his ears. He was only 7 years old, a complete innocent. I looked at my mother, strapped to a bomb. I thought of the baby I was carrying, only 6 weeks along, a tiny life that hadn't even had a chance to start. Fine, I said. David's eyes shot open. Emma. Fine, I repeated, my voice stronger now as I stared into the camera. But I want to see Liam and my mom walk out of here first. Once they are safe, David can shoot me. Marcus cocked his head as if he was considering it. No, he said. You do not get to bargain. You are the price, remember? Then he smiled. Before I reveal what Marcus demanded next, and whether David took the shot, please type the number 20 in the comments if you are still here with me. That number is crucial to the story. I need to know you are ready for what is coming. Just a quick warning, this story contains fictional scenes that are very intense. If that kind of material makes you uncomfortable, this might be a good place to stop. Are you still with me? Okay, let us continue. With no way out, I faced the man who had orchestrated my doom. You want my father to suffer because he killed Alexander? I asked, keeping my voice from shaking. I can understand that. Marcus set his glass down and leaned in. He did not kill him. He murdered him. Alexander was only 19 years old. The official report said it was self-defense. Reports, Marcus sneered. Your father's reports, written by his buddies and signed off by a prosecutor who owed him a favor. Alexander fired one shot because he was terrified. Your father shot him 3 times in the chest and left him to die on the street. I glanced at David. His face was ghostly white, the gun hanging loosely in his hand. I am not defending what my father did, I said carefully, but turning David into a killer will just create more pain. Pain? Marcus laughed, a sharp and broken sound. You want to talk about pain? I will tell you about it. I buried my son on the day he should have turned 20. I watched my wife drink herself into an early grave. David spent 3 years in a mental institution because he could not cope with losing his brother. Do not you dare talk to me about pain. Then do not make Liam another victim, I begged. Marcus's eyes narrowed into slits. Liam knows the meaning of sacrifice. He is a Vulov. He is a 7-year-old child. He is old enough. The coldness in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. I had to try a different way. You are forcing David to become the one thing you hate, a person who kills someone's child. How is that justice? Because Richard will be forced to watch, Marcus said simply, and he will have to live with it. For the rest of his life, he will wake up knowing his daughter is gone because of a choice he made 15 years ago. That is justice. Behind me, my mom whispered, Emma, please do not. Marcus glanced at her, then his eyes returned to me. His expression shifted, showing something like genuine surprise. You never told her, he said to David. David's jaw was clenched, but he remained silent. Tell me what? I asked. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face. You are pregnant, about 6 weeks. David has been tracking your cycle, your symptoms, even your hormone levels from blood work. He got the results from your doctor. He paused. You're carrying my grandchild. The breath left my body in a rush. My mom made a strangled noise. Emma, which makes this all the more perfect, Marcus continued. Richard loses his daughter and his grandchild. I lose a grandchild as well, but I have already lost a son. I can handle that kind of grief. Your father cannot. I could not speak. I could not even think. David's face was a mask of agony. I did not want this. I tried to stop him. You did nothing, Marcus snapped. You have dragged this out for 6 months, David. You had 3 chances to finish this, and you failed every time. The brake line in February, you cut it wrong. It just triggered a warning light. The security system in May. You tripped the backup alarm. The contaminated water in August, you used a dose so low it would not harm a small child. My mind was racing. 3 attempts, 3 failures. David had been trying to get rid of me for months, but he had failed on purpose. You do not have the stomach for it, Marcus said, his voice dripping with contempt. You are weak, just like Alexander. David's hand tightened on the gun. So I am making this simple, Marcus said. David, raise the gun. Aim for Emma's chest. You have 60 seconds. If you fail to shoot, I will detonate both bombs. Your son dies. Her mother dies. Emma dies regardless. Everybody loses. The 3 guards on the catwalks above us shifted their rifles, aiming at David, ready to fire if he aimed anywhere else. 60 seconds, Marcus repeated. Starting now. David slowly raised the pistol. It was trembling as he pointed it at me. His eyes were filled with tears. I am sorry, he whispered. Oh, Emma, I am so sorry. I looked at Marcus on the monitor. You are lying. You would never harm your own grandchild. Marcus's cruel smile never wavered. I have already given up one of my sons. What is one grandchild? You are bluffing, I said. This is all a risk. The bombs are not real. You are just using fear to control him. There are no explosives. 40 seconds, Marcus said calmly. David's gun was shaking so hard I could see it from across the room. Marcus, please. Is Liam really wearing a bomb? Please, 30 seconds, just tell me. David screamed, the gun still pointed at me, his voice shattering into a million pieces. Did you really attach a bomb to my son? Marcus leaned back in his chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Of course I did. Do you think I am an amateur? The moment the authorities arrive, I will set it off. The moment you point that gun at anyone but Emma, I will set it off. And the moment you fail to pull that trigger in, he glanced at his watch. 20 seconds, I will set it off. David's face went completely pale. I looked at Liam, who was still rocking in the corner, humming with his hands over his ears, totally unaware he was wearing a bomb. 7 years old. My fingers found the panic button in my pocket. If Marcus was serious, pressing it would mean the end for all of us. If he was lying, it was our only way out. I had 10 seconds to decide. David's finger moved to the trigger. I am sorry, he said again, his voice now completely hollow. It was the sound of a man who had nothing left to lose. 10 seconds, Marcus counted. My mother cried out, Emma, no! David's aim steadied, pointing right at my heart. 5. I stared into David's eyes and I saw the exact moment he chose. 4. His finger began to squeeze. 3. I pressed the panic button twice. 2. David's gun shifted away from me toward the giant screen toward Marcus. 1. And then he shot. Everything happened in a split second, but the horror of it all seemed to slow time down to a crawl. David fired the gun. I winced. The bullet smashed through the massive monitor. Glass exploded outward in a spray of light. The image of Marcus shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. His voice was cut off, replaced by the crackle of electronics and the smell of smoke. The 3 guards on the platforms whipped around to face David, raising their rifles. Traitor! One of them yelled. I jammed the panic button 2 more times, as hard as I could. The large loading bay doors blew inward with a deafening crash. Federal agents in black tactical gear swarmed into the warehouse. Carter's voice echoed through the space. Federal agents, drop your weapons now! A high window shattered from above. Sergeant Rodriguez, his sniper rifle braced on the roof, fired 2 quick shots. 2 of the guards on the catwalks crumpled and fell, their rifles clattering to the ground. The last guard aimed his weapon at the agents below. A 3rd shot from Rodriguez sent him tumbling over the railing. He hit the concrete 30 feet below with a sickening thud. And that is when I heard the beeping. It was fast and high-pitched, and it was coming from 2 different places. It was coming from my mom's chair and from Liam's backpack. It is a bomb! Someone screamed. David reacted instantly. He raced over to Liam and tore the backpack off the boy's shoulders. Liam yelped in surprise, his hands flying to his ears. David was already unzipping the bag. Inside was a cylinder covered in wires. A red light blinked faster and faster. Beep, beep, beep. An agent in a full bomb suit ran forward. He glanced inside and yelled, Flashbang, get down! But it was too late. David was holding the device, just staring at it, and I saw the exact moment he understood what Marcus had truly done. It was not a real bomb. It was a stun grenade, a non lethal device. It was another lie. The device detonated in his hands. The explosion was a blinding flash of white light and a deafening boom. A shockwave slammed into us like a physical blow inside the warehouse. I shielded my face with my arm, but the flash was so intense it burned through my closed eyelids. Every sound vanished. A single high pitched ringing took its place. The noise was so piercing it felt like my eardrums were about to burst. I was blind, deaf, and unable to think. As my vision slowly returned, I saw blurry figures moving. I saw David on his back, thrown 6 feet from where he had stood. His hands were charred black, with skin peeling away and smoke rising from them. His eyes were open but vacant, his pupils were huge, and his mouth moved without making a sound. Liam was on the floor beside him. He was curled into a tight ball, screaming silently. I could not hear him, but I saw his mouth wide open and his small body shaking with terror. My mom was screaming too, I think. Her chair was tipping over. The zip ties still bound her wrists tightly. The device beneath her seat was beeping more rapidly. A second device was ready to detonate. The bomb technician shouted and sprinted toward her. Carter reached her first. He dropped to his knees, took a multi-tool from his vest, and started cutting the zip ties. Do not get up, it is on a pressure sensor. The side door, which no one was guarding, suddenly flew open. 2 men in black tactical uniforms rushed in. It was Vulov's backup. Their rifles were raised and they were shooting. The flashes from their muzzles lit up the dark corner like strobes. Bullets ripped through the air. They crashed into steel tables and concrete walls, sending sparks flying. An FBI agent went down, clutching his leg. Another agent returned fire. Glass from the overhead lights exploded and rained down like glittering dust. Dad appeared in the doorway just behind the gunmen. He was supposed to be at Unit 20. He held his service weapon, his face a mask of pure fury. Emma! He yelled. One of the shooters spun around to face him. I did not hear the gunshot, but I saw my dad collapse behind a metal table. Bullets chewed up the steel right where he had been standing. Carter cut through the last zip tie. He grabbed my mom's arms and yanked her away from the chair. The device beneath it exploded. It was another flashbang grenade. It unleashed another punishing wave of light, sound, and force. The chair was thrown backward with its metal legs twisted. Mom and Carter were knocked to the ground as smoking fragments flew everywhere. Mom rolled onto her side. She was coughing, her hands clamped over her ears, but she was alive. The gunfight became more intense. The FBI agents were taking cover while the backup shooters advanced. Bullets were flying in every direction. Rodriguez fired again from the roof, and one of the shooters dropped mid-stride. The second shooter turned his attention to David. He was still on the floor, completely defenseless. His hands were too burned to even hold a weapon. The shooter raised his rifle, aiming it directly at David's head. I did not hesitate. I just ran. My legs pumped and blood pounded in my now deaf ears. I slammed into David's shoulder, shoving him out of the line of fire. The bullet that should have hit his head tore through my upper left shoulder. The pain was a blinding, white-hot explosion. It was the worst pain I had ever imagined. My knees buckled and I crashed onto the hard concrete floor. Hot, sticky blood was already soaking through my shirt. Through a fog of pain, I saw Dad stand up from behind the table and fire his weapon 3 times. The other shooter dropped, his rifle clattering away. Everything in the factory went silent, or maybe I just could not hear anymore. I was on my back, staring up at the meat hooks on the ceiling. A pool of blood was spreading out from under me. My shoulder felt like it was on fire. The pain traveled down my arm and up into my neck and jaw. I could not move my left hand or feel my fingers at all. David's face appeared over me. His burned hands reached for me, but he could not touch me. Soot covered his face and tears streamed down his cheeks. His mouth formed words, but I could not hear them. I tried to speak, but my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Why? I could read the word on his lips. Why did you do that for me? Blood filled my throat. I coughed, tasting metal. Because, I managed to say, each word was agony. This has to end with someone. His face crumbled. He leaned down and rested his forehead against mine. I felt his tears on my skin. Then my dad was there. He knelt beside me, pushing hard on my shoulder to stop the bleeding. I could not hear his words, but I saw the absolute terror in his eyes. Behind him, FBI medics swarmed in. One cut away my shirt while another pressed gauze into the wound. My mom crawled to my side. Her bruised face came into my fading vision. Her lips were moving. Stay with me, sweetheart. Just stay with me. I tried to nod, wanting to tell her I would be okay, but my vision was shrinking, turning into a dark tunnel. The pain was fading into a cold, strange numbness. The very last thing I saw before I passed out was little Liam. An agent was carrying the terrified boy away. His hands were clamped over his ears, his mouth open in a silent scream. And David, with his ruined hands, was still reaching out for me. The smell of disinfectant and a steady beeping sound pulled me back. I opened my eyes to see white ceiling tiles and dim fluorescent lights. A tube was taped to my left arm. My right shoulder was wrapped in heavy bandages, and a dull ache throbbed with every beat of my heart. I was in a hospital room. I slowly turned my head. My whole body hurt. I saw my dad asleep in a chair beside me. His head was on his chest, and he still had on his tactical vest over a bloody shirt. The small movement woke him instantly. His eyes, red and swollen, were filled with panic. Emma, he said, his voice trembling. He grabbed my hand and squeezed it. Thank God you were unconscious for 2 hours. They said the surgery was successful, but the baby, I whispered. My other hand drifted down to my stomach. Is my baby all right? The door opened and a woman in a white coat entered. She seemed to be in her late 40s with her dark hair pulled back and a stethoscope resting on her neck. Her name tag read Dr. Rachel Bennett, an obstetrician specializing in trauma surgery. Miss Martinez, she said, pulling a rolling stool closer. My name is Dr. Bennett. I have been overseeing your care. How are you feeling? The baby, I repeated, my voice stronger this time. Is the baby okay? Dr. Bennett's expression was calm but very serious. The fetal heartbeat is strong and steady. That is the good news. I held my breath, waiting for what would come next. The bullet wound passed straight through. It entered your upper left shoulder and exited cleanly through the muscle. You have no bone damage and no major arteries were hit. You will require physical therapy, but a full recovery is expected. But? I asked, sensing there was more to the story. Dr. Bennett held up a tablet showing an ultrasound image. The trauma, the stress, and the physical shock caused a subchorionic hematoma. It is a clot of blood located between your uterine wall and the sac that contains the baby. I stared at the grainy black and white image. I could see a tiny flicker in the middle, which was the heartbeat. Beside it, there was a dark, shadowy area. What does that mean for us? Dad asked in a low voice. It means we have a higher risk of miscarriage over the next 2 to 3 weeks, Dr. Bennett explained. Currently, Miss Martinez is around 6 to 7 weeks pregnant. This is the first trimester, which is already a high risk period. The hematoma could absorb on its own, or it might lead to bleeding and the loss of the pregnancy. The room began to feel unsteady. I gripped the side of the bed. What can I do to help? I asked. You need complete bed rest for 14 days. We will also give you progesterone supplements to support the pregnancy. Absolutely no physical exertion and no stress. She paused and looked directly at me. I understand that may be difficult considering your circumstances, but your body must have time to heal. These next 2 weeks are critical. Will my baby make it? I whispered. Dr. Bennett's face softened with empathy. I cannot offer you any promises, but I have seen women recover from far worse. You have to give your body time. Just rest. We will monitor you very closely. I nodded as tears began to fall. I felt a confusing mix of relief and absolute terror. My dad squeezed my hand gently. We will make sure you get all the rest you need. I will stay right here with you. Your mother will join us as soon as she is discharged. Mom is here? I asked. She is 2 floors below us, Dad said. She has some bruised ribs and a slight concussion, but she will be fine. Carter brought her in right after you arrived. As if summoned, Carter appeared in the doorway. He was still dressed in his tactical uniform and looked as if he had not slept in days. Miss Martinez, he said with a respectful nod, I am relieved to see that you are awake. What happened after I lost consciousness? I asked. Carter stepped fully into the room and crossed his arms over his chest. We gained control of the plant. 3 of Volkov's men are dead, and we have 2 more in custody. Your mother and Liam were brought here for evaluation. Liam is with Child Protective Services at the moment. A medical exam revealed no physical injuries, but he is deeply traumatized. He has not said a word since the explosion. A heavy weight settled in my chest. And David? Carter's expression hardened. He is in federal custody, handcuffed to a bed 1 floor above us. He needed skin grafts on his hands for second-degree burns. He is going to face numerous charges like conspiracy, accessory to kidnapping, attempted murder, and racketeering. And what about Marcus? I asked. He got away, Carter said, his voice filled with frustration. He boarded a private jet from a small airfield near Houston. He touched down in Monterrey, Mexico about 6 hours ago. Interpol has issued a red notice and we have successfully frozen $18 million in assets from Volkov Enterprises. 40 members of his crew have been arrested in 3 different states, I said flatly, but he is gone. Carter leaned against the wall and replied, For now, but David's cooperation is going to be absolutely vital. He knows every safe house, every contact, and every financial move Marcus makes. His testimony could dismantle the entire organization. I shut my eyes. He wants to see me, does he not? Carter gave a small nod. He asked for you specifically. He wants you to act as his lawyer. A dry, exhausted laugh escaped my lips. That is a severe conflict of interest. I am one of his victims. I cannot possibly represent him. Carter said, he is aware of that, but he trusts you. And frankly, Miss Martinez, your advice, even off the record, can save lives. The faster we locate Marcus, the safer we all will be. I looked at my dad, who stood silent with a tense jaw. I will see him, I whispered. But only this one time and not as his lawyer. Dr. Bennett clearly disapproved. Miss Martinez, I cannot recommend this course of action. 5 minutes, I said firmly. Then I promise I will rest. 20 minutes later, a nurse pushed my wheelchair to the hospital's secure wing. Two federal marshals stood guard at David's door. I found David propped up in bed inside. His hands were bandaged all the way to his elbows. An oxygen tube was in his nose, and one ankle was shackled to the bed frame. He looked up when I entered. His face was pale, his eyes were sunken, and his lips were chapped. Emma, he breathed. I rolled my chair closer to him, careful of my injured shoulder. I am not your lawyer, I cannot be. But I will give you some advice for Liam's sake, not yours. David nodded, finding it hard to swallow. I understand. Silence stretched between us. Did you ever love me at all? The question I had been holding back finally escaped. David's eyes filled with tears. It started out as an act. Marcus gave me your file and told me to become your perfect man. But by our third date, his voice broke. By our third date, I was already in love with you. After that, I was just trying to find a way out. You had 5 years, I reminded him. I know. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just need you to know it was real. It might have started as a lie, but my love for you became true. I looked at his bandaged hands, thought of the new life inside me, and remembered pushing him out of the bullet's path. I cannot be your lawyer, I repeated. It is a major conflict of interest, but I can help you find a defense. I will find a good attorney and advise on any plea deals. This is all for Liam. He deserves a father who tries to do the right thing, no matter how late. David closed his eyes and gave a slight nod. I began to wheel myself out. Emma, he called out softly. I turned to look at him. Thank you for saving my life. I did not respond. I simply left the room. When I got back to my own room, Dr. Bennett was waiting with papers. I am referring you to Dr. Sarah Williams. She is an OB specialist for patients who have experienced trauma. She will monitor you closely for the next month. I was too tired to argue, so I just nodded. The door opened again. My mom was standing there leaning on a crutch. Her face was bruised, but her eyes were sharp. Emma, honey, she said, her voice trembling. I need to tell you something about the day they captured me. I looked at this incredible woman who had protected me from a bomb and faced Marcus Volkov's rage. I knew her next words would change everything. What is it, Mom? She glanced at Dad, then back at me. In a whisper, she said, I already knew. Dad stepped into the hall at my mom's request. She wanted to speak with me alone. Mom lowered herself carefully into the chair beside my bed. She rested her crutch against it, her bruised face showing both shame and determination. What did you mean you knew? I asked gently. She took a shaky breath. About 8 months ago, an envelope appeared on our doorstep. There was no stamp or return address, just my name printed in block letters. I waited for her to continue. Inside was a file, my mom said, her voice barely a whisper. It had police reports, psychological evaluations, and crime scene pictures. It was all about the night your father shot Alexander Vulov. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. What did the file say? It claimed that Richard had murdered him in cold blood. Tears welled in my mom's eyes. It said Alexander was unarmed and shot in the back. It accused your father of planting a gun on him to fake self-defense. The report called the whole thing a lie, covered up by other officers and a corrupt prosecutor. I stared at her in disbelief. And you believed it? I did not know what to believe, she admitted, her voice tight with emotion. There were photos, Emma, pictures of the crime scene I had never seen. The angles were all wrong, and a psych report said your father had antisocial tendencies. It mentioned he had been written up for excessive force 3 times before Alexander's death. Mom, I found a letter in there. She stopped me, pulling a folded paper from her pocket with trembling hands. This one? She passed it to me. I carefully unfolded the typed words. Mrs. Martinez, your husband is a very dangerous man. He has been lying to you for 15 years. He is now targeting your daughter. I need your help to keep her safe. Please call this number. A concerned father. A phone number was typed at the bottom. It was unsigned. A concerned father, I read out loud. A sudden chill went through me as I understood. Marcus. Mom nodded, wiping away a tear. I did not realize it was him then. I just knew I had to learn the truth if Richard was a danger to you. So you called the number? No. Mom shook her head. I am not an idiot, Emma. I have been married to a cop for 30 years. I know how evidence is supposed to be handled. So I took the documents to a private investigator. I found one who was not connected to the Austin Police Department and had no ties to your father. And I asked him for help. He did a forensic analysis, checking the paper and ink, and examined the digital data from the scanned police files. My mom's voice became strong and sure. Every single document was a forgery. They were convincing, expensive forgeries, but they were not authentic. The crime scene photos were digitally altered. The psych evaluation was fake, using a real doctor's stolen identity. The note was written on paper made this year, not 15 years ago. A huge wave of relief washed over me. So you knew Dad was innocent. I knew Marcus Vulov was trying to trick me, Mom corrected. But I did not understand his motive until it was nearly too late. What do you mean? Mom's hands gripped her crutch so hard her knuckles turned white. The investigator told me the fake documents had one single goal. They were created to make me doubt Richard, to make me afraid of him, to push me away from my own husband and child. She looked right at me, her eyes filled with pain. Emma, Marcus was turning my love for you into a weapon against me. He knew that if I thought you were in danger, I would do anything, even turn against your father. But you did not do that, I reminded her. I was trying to warn Richard, Mom said. The day of the funeral, I was going to pull him aside, show him the envelope, and tell him everything. But when I got to the cemetery, her voice trembled. Two men ambushed me in the parking garage. They used chloroform to knock me out. I woke up tied to that chair with zip ties. I reached for her hand and held on. I am so sorry, Mom whispered. I should have gone to Richard the moment I got that envelope. I should have trusted him. But I was scared and I needed proof first. Marcus used that against me. Mom, I said, making her look at me. You did trust Dad. You hired someone to prove the papers were fake. You tried to tell him. You did not betray him at all. I waited too long, she said, and because I waited, you were almost killed. No, I squeezed her hand tighter. Marcus is the one who almost got me killed. You defended our family the only way you knew how, by finding the truth. That is not a betrayal, that is bravery. Mom began to cry, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was so scared. While I was sitting on that bomb, all I could think was, if I die, you will never know I did not betray your father. You will think I was helping Marcus. I never thought that, I told her, though a tiny part of me wondered if I might have had things ended differently. Marcus's plan was for our family to destroy itself, Mom said, drying her eyes. He wanted Richard to think I had betrayed him. He wanted you to think I was a part of it. He wanted me to be frozen with fear. He hoped our family would fall apart on its own before he ever had to fire a gun. I thought about the 5 years David had spent getting close to me, the constant surveillance, the lies, the slow, methodical destruction of trust. That is his way, I said quietly. He does not just take lives, he makes people ruin each other. Mom nodded. And he almost succeeded. The door creaked open. Dad stood in the doorway, his face uncertain, looking back and forth between us. Richard, Mom said, her voice full of emotion. I need to tell you something. I heard, Dad said quietly, stepping into the room. I was standing just outside. I am sorry, Linda. I had to know. Mom's expression crumpled. I should have told you right away. Dad closed the distance in 3 long strides and pulled her into an embrace. You did exactly what I would have done. You got the facts before you made a move. That is not betrayal. That is just smart police work. Mom sobbed against his shoulder. I watched them both. My parents had lived with the threat of Marcus Vulov hanging over them for 15 years. They had been lied to, terrorized, and nearly shattered. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Marcus tried to turn us against each other, but he failed. I gestured to Dad. Come here, both of you. They walked over to either side of my hospital bed. I took their hands, holding one in each of mine. From now on, I said, my voice steady, this family tells the truth. No more secrets, no more hesitating. We face things together or we will fall apart. Dad nodded, his jaw set. Mom squeezed my hand. Together, together. I whispered the word. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the city in shades of pink and gold. It was the start of a new day. We had survived the night. Now we had to learn how to live the rest of our lives. 2 years had passed and changed our world. Things were not perfect, but we were getting by. I was 36 now, and I made the trip to the Texas State Prison each month. Daniel, my 2-year-old, was on my lap. He had his father's dark, curly hair, but my curious, bright eyes. He was always asking questions I could not answer yet. On the other side of the glass, David was in a wheelchair. 3 surgeries had restored the use of his hands, but not his legs. He was paralyzed from the waist down. A piece of shrapnel from the explosion had severed his spinal cord. He was in the second year of a 12-year sentence. David's voice came softly as he pressed his hand flat against the glass. He has gotten so big, he said. Daniel copied him, placing his small hand against the thick barrier. Da! He yelled out. My heart hurt. He is talking a lot more now. Dada, Mama. No. A sad, broken smile appeared on David's face. That sounds about right, he said. Liam sat beside me. He was 9 years old now and much more reserved than other boys his age. Sometimes he joined us for these visits, other times it was just too difficult for him. Today was one of the good days. Hey, buddy, David said to his oldest. Hi, Dad, Liam answered, his voice quiet but steady. I thought about those first few weeks when everything felt like a bad dream. 2 weeks after the shooting, I was on bed rest, staring at an ultrasound monitor. The doctor pointed to a shadow near the tiny, flickering heart. The bruise is shrinking, she had told me. That is a very good sign. 4 weeks after that, it had vanished. Your baby is a fighter, Miss Martinez. I started to weep with relief and shock. Daniel had fought to stay alive, and so had I. He was born in January of 2024. He was a healthy 7 pounds, 3 ounces. All the nurses called him our miracle baby. I held him close, exhausted and sore, but filled with so much love. You fought so hard to get here, I whispered. Thank you. 2 days later, Liam met his new brother. He stood by my hospital bed looking anxious. You can touch him, I said gently. Liam slowly reached out one finger and touched Daniel's little hand. Daniel's fingers wrapped around his, and a real smile lit up Liam's face for the first time in a very long time. Now, as I watched Daniel press his hand to the glass to be like his dad, I felt the immense weight of those 2 years. The operations, the therapy, the court dates. We were slowly piecing together a life that was starting to feel almost normal. I can still clearly remember the day of Marcus's arrest. I was 6 months pregnant, standing in the living room with my dad, watching the news report. On the television, Marcus Vulov was being led onto a plane in handcuffs surrounded by officers. His face was blank, but his cold eyes swept over the cameras. It was like he was memorizing every person there. Carter was speaking at a press conference. He said, based on information from a cooperating witness, David Vulov, Mexican police, and the FBI conducted a raid on a villa near Puerto Vallarta. Marcus Vulkov is now in United States custody and will be facing federal charges. My dad saw my confused look and answered the question I had not asked. Marcus fled on a private jet the same night as the raid. The flight was filed as a medical transport for a sick person. By the time we figured it out, his plane was already in Mexico. He was being protected by a cartel in Puerto Vallarta. He thought he was untouchable there, but David gave him up. Carter explained it all at the press conference. David provided the location of the house, all the security codes, and every escape route. Without his information, Marcus would probably still be free. Now Marcus would live out the rest of his life in a prison cell. I sank into a chair, feeling the weight of it all, and rested a hand on my pregnant belly. Tears streamed down my cheeks. It is over, I whispered. It is finally over. My dad gave my shoulder a squeeze. Not quite until the trial, he said, but we are almost there. The trial began in October of 2024, 1 year after the attack. I sat in the courtroom holding my 3-month-old son, Daniel, who slept in a carrier against my chest. Marcus Vulov sat at the defense table in a gray suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He looked more like a businessman than a monster. David testified from prison on a video monitor. He looked thinner, but his voice was steady. My father organized the kidnapping of Linda Martinez. He held my 7-year-old son hostage with a bomb to force me to cooperate. He ordered me to murder Emma Martinez and her father, Richard Martinez. When I refused, he detonated grenades that permanently injured me. The jury reached a verdict in just 4 hours, guilty on every count. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, plus an additional 80 years. He was headed to ADX Florence in Colorado, a prison for the nation's most dangerous criminals. The judge's voice was cold as steel. Mr. Volkov, you turned your own family into weapons. You endangered children. You will now live in a concrete box, and the world will be a safer place for it. Marcus's face showed no emotion, but as guards led him away, his eyes met the screen showing David's face. His lips formed 2 silent words, "You are dead." On the monitor, I could see both pain and relief in David's expression. He was free at last. 2 years later, I stood watching David speak with his sons through a thick pane of glass. Something inside me settled. It was not quite forgiveness, but it was acceptance. That Sunday, we were having dinner at my parents' home. Liam was helping my mom with the plates while I spoon fed Daniel some sweet potatoes. My dad pulled a heavy pan out of the oven, but the lid slipped and crashed loudly onto the tile floor. Liam froze on the spot. He clapped his hands over his ears and his breathing grew fast and shallow. His eyes were wide with terror. I was by his side in an instant, kneeling down. I spoke in a calm voice. Liam, look at me. Let's count together. 1, 2, 3. His breathing began to even out. 4, 5, 6, that is it. You are safe. It was only a pan lid. You are all right. He slowly nodded and lowered his hands. I am sorry. Loud sounds were still a difficult trigger for him. I know, my love, I said. You are doing so well. Later, as we cleaned up, Liam quietly asked me, am I going to be broken like my dad? Because I have PTSD. I knelt down to meet his gaze. You are not broken. You are healing. Scars just show you survived something tough. You will grow up to be a strong, brave man, Liam. I promise. He looked at me and said, Daniel almost was not born, was he? I was surprised he knew. That is true. After everything, the doctors were worried. But he was a fighter and made it, just like you are fighting now. Liam glanced at his baby brother, his face softening. He is a tough little guy, Liam said. So are you, I told him. That evening, after Daniel was asleep, I checked my email. A notification had arrived from the prison bureau. It was an official update on Marcus Vuloff. His status was incarcerated. His location was ADX Florence, Colorado. His security level was maximum. A parole hearing was not applicable. His sentence was life without parole. I showed the email to my dad. They are keeping him at ADX Florence. That is a supermax prison for the worst of the worst. My dad nodded. El Chapo is there. So are the Unabomber and the Boston Marathon bomber. Marcus is in their league now. Do you feel safe? I asked him. My dad looked over at Daniel sleeping in his bassinet. Safe? Not completely. Marcus had a lot of connections. Someone from his old world could always try to settle a score. But what about Marcus himself? He looked me straight in the eye. He is 67 years old. He spends 23 hours a day alone in a 7 by 12-foot cell. He is going to die there. So yes, we are much safer than we were 2 years ago. I nodded slowly. For me, that was enough. Later that night, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the stars over Austin. I thought about everything we had been through. Marcus was locked in a concrete box for good, but I still kept the security cameras and panic buttons. The system could alert the police in 90 seconds. It was not because of Marcus, it was because one of his old associates might still be holding a grudge. Carter had warned me. We cut off the snake's head, but the body can still twitch for a while. Even so, knowing Marcus would die in that cell let me breathe just a little bit easier. I looked up at the night sky, my hand drifting to my stomach out of habit, even though Daniel is now a healthy 2-year-old. My life did not turn out the way I had planned, but it is mine, and Marcus Vuloff will never be able to harm my family again. When I reflect on everything, I understand that this story is not simply about revenge or betrayal. It is about breaking a terrible cycle of pain that can ruin a family for generations. For 15 years, Marcus used his own grief like a weapon to control his son. David was stuck between being loyal to his father and his love for me. He was put in a situation with no good outcome. He was forced to either kill me or see his own child die. I was almost just another victim in a long story of family vengeance. I came so close to losing my parents, my husband, and my unborn child. It all happened because one man chose revenge instead of choosing to heal. David's betrayal of our family did not come from a place of hate. It came from fear and years of emotional manipulation. I learned a very important lesson from all of this. Do not allow someone else's anger to become your cage. Do not expect the people you love to be perfect, but do not stop loving them when you finally see their flaws. And more than anything, I am incredibly grateful for second chances. I am grateful my baby is alive and thriving. I am grateful my mother had the courage to search for the truth instead of giving in to her fear. I am grateful that David made the choice to shoot a television screen and not me. Here is my advice, and I hope you can learn from my painful experience. Do not ignore the warning signs just because you are in love. You can and should trust people, but you also need to check the facts. If this story has touched you in some way, please let me know in the comments below. What would you do if you discovered that your parent had faked their own death? Please share this video with others and subscribe to our channel. Your support is incredibly important to us. Thank you for watching my story all the way to the end. As a final note, our future stories may contain some fictional elements to help us teach a lesson. If this type of content is not right for you, please feel free to watch something else. Be well.